Meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting of the East Troy School District Board of Education and all other meetings of the board are open to the public in compliance with state statute. Notice of the meeting has been sent to the media and/or has been publicly posted in an attempt to make the citizens of the district aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting.
Motion to approve the agenda as posted?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion or changes to the agenda?
No.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved.
I'd also like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 28th, 2020 regular board meeting.
All right, any discussion on the meeting minutes? All in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. Public participation. Is there anybody here tonight that would like to speak? Okay. We'll move on to the financial report.
I move the approval of September 2020 payments in the amount of $2,062.70 and receipts in the amount of $803,675.48 as reflected on the financial statements.
Any discussion, questions, comments? You have anything you'd like to cover, Kathy, or anything specific?
Yep.
Okay.
Looks good.
All right, if there's no other discussion, all in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Financial reports approved. Discussion action items. First one is approval of donations.
All right. It's on? All right, I can't hear myself. We only have one tonight, and that would be from Kelsey and Ron English. They have done a generous donation of $150 to the East Troy Community School District's Battle Bags project. So at this time, administration would like the board to consider approval of the $150 and offer a generous thank you.
I will make the motion to approve the donation with thanks.
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion.
No.
All in favor of approval, say thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Motion is approved. Next, so you said that's all, just the one? Okay. Next item is setting of the 2020-21 tax levy and 2021 district budget.
Okay, we're on page 42, and there's a lot we can talk about here. But the good news, in a nutshell, brief synopsis is we're proud to present a 1.5% tax levy increase, an overall tax levy increase, 1.5%. And the mill rate is actually significantly decreasing. So it's going from $9.18 to $8.72. That's a drop of a 5% tax levy increase. So on page 43, you have kind of that horizontal sheet that we talk about at the annual meeting quite a bit. And with the line through it is what was presented at the annual meeting. And now we have our final actual numbers just to the right of that. So the first thing you see is if you looked up the revenue limit from the revenue limit worksheet on the DPI website, which is directly driven by student membership, We have a revenue limit this year of $18,845,104. Now, lots of times people want to compare that to last year. So the next couple of lines are, well, can we compare it? Is it apples to apples? One thing that is not apples to apples is there's something called a transfer of service. If we have additional responsibilities to add to our budget from, for example, garbage collection is being discontinued and we have to pick up garbage collection now as a school district. Or what a school type example is special education students move into the district and we have to hire a one-to-one aide per their IEP, or some different services that we didn't have before. Occupational therapy, again, it could be an example. A student moves in, needs occupational therapy in their IEP, we have to hire an occupational therapist. This has been increasing for us in years. If you go to the left, you can see more and more different kinds of special education services are being required and being added. This year, that amount, $260,824. Again, those are for costs and services we didn't have the year before. Then another item, in order to compare apples to apples, that I kind of take off the total, is voucher aid growth. A few years ago, private school vouchers were put on the public school tax levies. I like to say that we're the vehicle for collecting the money for the private school vouchers. This year, there was an increase of $149,775 in that voucher aid growth. The total amount for vouchers now on the public school tax levy is $337,576. But again, the growth this year alone, $150,000. I'm not here to say right or wrong or give an opinion on that. I'm here to say it's difficult when someone looks at their tax bill and sees a taxing dollar amount for East Troy schools to realize that a pretty significant growing portion of that doesn't even go to our schools. It is levied for by us, but then we turn around and pay that $337,000 at the end of the year to the state. It's an in and an out for us, okay? You have some numbers at the bottom. I mentioned we have a 1.5% tax levy increase this year. If we wouldn't have had that $149,000 of private school voucher aid growth, our tax levy increase would have been 0.5, 0.5% only instead of 1.5%, okay? If you were to peel off the private school vouchers entirely, so take off that full $337,000, not just the increase from last year to this year, could have had a decrease of 0.71% in our tax levy. I think that is, again, an under-noticed line item, which is why I point that out, and it's an ever-increasing line item for public schools in the state of Wisconsin. Going on to the next couple of lines, you see a number that is $5,793,909. That is our equalization aid, or state aid. When we talk in generalities, 90% of a school district's budget comes from property taxes and state aid. Property taxes plus state aid is what makes up the revenue limit formula, so all those mathematical concepts. So equalization aid this year grew considerably. You see a 19% increase there in our equalization aid. We are about in equalization aid now where we were 10 years ago. And there's another sheet that we're going to get to later that shows about 30% of our revenue limit now comes from equalization aid. It had been dropping significantly. It was in the low 20s just a few years ago. Why has it gone up? There's 3 reasons I could analyze this year. Number one, there's more money in the overall pot of equalization aid for the state of Wisconsin. There's a longitudinal spreadsheet that we'll look at. You can see it in just a minute. And again, that state aid had been here, went down, has been climbing back up. There was a significant, again, increase in this year's total equalization aid available to all public schools, again, in the state of Wisconsin. Another reason it went up for us, we ended last year, 1920, with, if you recall, about 870,000 positive into the fund balance. We saved money last year, greater than our budget. We're what's called negative tertiary. Some districts are positive tertiary, we're negative tertiary. That has to deal with your property value per student. And basically, the less we spend, the more aid we get. For positive tertiary schools, it's the opposite. The more they spend, the more aid they get. So last year, we closed out with a year that we spent less. So we're essentially penalized less, and our portion of the state aid grew. The third reason, and I can point this out on the longitudinal spreadsheet also when we get there, our property value that encompasses the East Troy Community School District grew, where is it? 6.85%. It's the next line. Our property value is that 1,774,000,000 number right underneath. Again, we grew 6.85%. You actually use a figure from the previous year to determine this year's aid. The previous year's number grew less than the state average, which means we got poorer, okay, not richer. We have a poorer property value per member growth than the average. That shifts the amount of aid that goes to us from other school districts. So those are the three reasons, again, that I could come up with that we garnered more in the state aid pot this year. Now, next year, I'm going to talk a lot about next year tonight, because this year, the budget's under wraps, kind of signed, sealed, delivered, put a stamp on it, and we go, right? Next year is going to be the tough year. So our aid went up significantly this year. Probably it's going to go down. But can I project some of those things I just talked about? No, I can't project how much is going to be in the state aid pot available for all schools next year yet as of this time. The next biennial budget is going to be coming out February or later, okay? So we don't know. With COVID, there's been a lot of talk again that revenues for the state are down overall. So is it likely that we're going to dip back down in state aid? Possibly. We're also going to be spending more this year. Right now, in the budget that we talked about at the annual meeting, that you approved previously at a board meeting to spend some of that $800,000 that we're carrying over from the previous year on the mitigation measures that we're doing in the district for, especially for COVID-related reasons, $400,000 beyond the balanced budget at this point. That means we're going to be spending more than our budget come next June. Again, because we're that negative tertiary, the more we spend, the more we lose in aid. So we're probably going to have a bit of a swing here. We had a nice year this year going up in aid. It's probably going to be swinging back down again next year. Okay, right underneath equalization aid, again, you see property value growth, 6.85%. I had projected 2% just conservatively at the annual meeting. Again, I don't know what property values are going to do until I see the Department of Revenue report on October 1st. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 years on this sheet, and you can see it's the highest that it's been in 4 years, so that's good. Mill rate, so this is the taxation rate again, per $1,000 of home value, so that's dropping. So we're going up in our levy 1.5%, but the property values increased 6.85%. So overall, that number of levy divided by property values is decreasing. That gets us into the conversation we'll have later. We don't know, sitting here in this room, none of us do, how much is new growth and how much is just reassessed higher value growth for that 6.85. If it's new growth, then there's a lot more people sharing the cost of the levy. So truly people's mill rates went down, property taxes will go down. If it's the same amount of property value and it's just all getting reassessed higher at 6.85%, then people are on average going to see that 1.5% tax levy increase. And then again, the sheet that I'll show you in a little bit shows every municipality is different too, because how they take a share of the pie can shift, okay? Let's see. Then we go down into the levies, Fund 10. So this kind of breaks down by our individual budget. So Fund 10, our general operations, $13,029,000. Fund 39, that's our debt service, $2,187,734. And then Fund 80 is our community service, $256,328. Those three numbers that I just read off make that total levy of $15,473,350. That's going up 1.5%. The community service, the Fund 80, stayed about the same. If you look, Fund 39 is quite a bit bigger than previous years. This is a good thing this year. We're going to be able to take some of that aid bump and put it into Fund 39, proactively defeasing future debt, saving interest to taxpayers, and what we'll talk about later, it goes even another step. Tony, you had asked me last year when we were going to referendum, you said, isn't there anything with debt maybe dropping off that would help us offset the cost of this referendum? And last year the answer was no. This year, talked with bond counsel already, and they said interest rates are so low, even though your debt on this building, the building we sit in right now, is not yet callable until 2025, we can refinance, put that money in escrow, utilize these low interest rates, and already kind of make a little bit of a pocket to, it won't completely, like when we built this building, one debt was falling off, the other debt was coming on, and the impact was essentially zero. Won't completely negate an operational referendum impact, but there's going to be a little bit that maybe we can peel off and layer in the new debt and at least help to offset it. And what we're doing right there in line 39 is again a big contributor. When you're able to defease debt early and build up this little escrow pot, then you have the ability to pool that into this refinancing illustration that Baird is working on for us right now. Now they want to wait till after tonight to do final numbers, but we have a preliminary going on it. The other thing, even if you don't do a referendum or the referendum fails, remember how I told you aid is going to swing? Next year, if we have a horribly bad aid year where we go down 20% instead of up 20%, because you've got this little cushion in here in Fund 39, next year, if we bring that to what it is in the amortization schedule, which is probably like $1.7 million, you're going to have a natural drop. So let's say the numbers were, if we kept it at $2,187,000 next year, the tax levy increase might be whatever, 8%. You can bring that number down to the actual debt schedule instead of defeasing like we're doing this year, and then that can bring the tax levy down next year. So it's a little bit of a cushion again in a good aid year like we have now, so that people aren't seeing the spikes. It isn't going down 5%, up 5%. We're trying to stay level here. And again, you can see if you look at the bottom number going across the years, 1.5%, 0%, 2.88 was a little high for us last year in 1920, but now 1.5%. And kind of again hoping to stay more to a reasonable tax levy increase every year rather than doing those swings. So that was a lot. Do we have any questions on this page? And then I'm going to show you some fun on the next pages. Okay? No questions on this one. So page 44, this is how it breaks out by municipality now. We have 8 different municipalities that feed in to the East Troy Community School District. The ones that hold the greatest share, Town of East Troy and Village of East Troy. So Town of East Troy is almost 50% of the tax levy. The Village of East Troy is just over 20% of the tax levy. So if you go all the way across to the right, again, what I can talk about, what you can talk about, I think, as board members, is averages. On average, tax levy is going up 1.5%. On average, the mill rate is going from 918 to 872, a 5% drop in the mill rate. But then over to the right is how different municipalities are affected within that average. And what that has to do with is property value on average went up 6.85%. If you were a municipality that grew greater than 6.85%, So let me pick on, let's see, this one grew 9%. So Town of Troy grew 9%. That one is now going to have a greater share of the tax levy. It now has a 4% tax levy increase instead of the average of 1.5%. Then if you were a municipality that got less than the average, so Village of East Troy, instead of growing right at the average of 6.85, it grew at 5.25. Their levy increased negative 0.02. So again, rather than seeing a 1.5, they're on average there. But then I caution you again, what that also depends upon is new growth or same houses and just reassessed. And that, again, is a difficult factor to know, okay? Especially because a lot of these municipalities, if I were to ask, did you have growth or was it just all reassessments? Different school districts, like Elkhorn, might be splitting the municipality with East Troy. So then you have to know what percentage of the growth happened in the Elkhorn School District versus the East Troy School District too, okay? Bottom left of this sheet, still on page 44, you see some of the, I try to put like key numbers. Again, what was our FTE last year? What is it this year? And you see the change, 6.22%. And when we get to the business manager report, we can go through the count in detail. Saw a nice article, it got forwarded to me this weekend, and it was talking about the statewide enrollment numbers, and it did a good job of explaining there's head count, which is kids in your buildings, but then the count that like these numbers are based on tonight is your resident membership count. So that's what I labeled here, the FTE count, okay? So what that does, and you'll see it again on the sheet when we get to it, is head count minus open enrolled in plus open enrolled out, and then takes a multiplication factor such as like 4K is only valued at 0.6 because they're half a day plus outreach. So that's again, the FTE or the resident membership is what's used in the calculation of the levy here. You see those revenue limit dollars we talked about, the equalization aid dollars, the equalized value we talked about, Fund 39 levy, net total all funds. And that one I'm comparing unaudited actual to a budget. So remember, we did spend significantly less last year. And then our mill rate, and then our total levies from the previous year. And then, like I said, I was happy to see our equalization aid as a percent of revenue limit is now at 30% again. That's about it was when I started here 12 years ago. And it went 30%, and then it went down to almost 20%. Now we're climbing back up. On the right side of that same page, you have a couple examples again, more in, I try to write out. So if you live in Town of East Troy, you had an equalized value increase of 6.69, a levy increase of 1.34. If you had a $100,000 home last year, paid a mill rate of $918 or $918 in school taxes. If everybody's values went up 6.69 proportionally, the house is now valued at $106,690. This year we have a mill rate of $872. So $872 times $106.69 is $930.34 in school taxes, so a $12 increase. You see again, Village of East Troy is the next example, 0, and then we have kind of the average example again. And on the average example, I try to say, all right, the first part is if everybody's assessed value just grew again equally. That second part of that average, it could be all new growth. If it's all new growth, taxes actually went down. Okay, so that's how we look at that page 44. Have any questions on that one? Some years when tax levy increases are higher, I say, keep this by you in December when tax bills go out, or better yet, just have people call me. And then, I'll talk them through, but usually on higher years, we get some phone calls. Page 45 through 50 goes into the required DPI budget publication format. So you've seen this, you saw it at the annual meeting, but again, the numbers have changed. These are the final numbers now. And represents, again, if you go on page 45, second spot down at the bottom, that 1.5% total levy increase, $8.72 mill rate. So I don't have anything much to add there. Page 51 is a copy of the revenue limit formula. I'm going to point out a few things on the revenue limit formula. So this is, again, how our maximum revenue is determined. This is that number you can't go over. Middle left, you can see it's a 3-year rolling average. So the enrollment or the membership is compared in 17, 18, 19 to 18, 19, 20. Right underneath that is what's called a declining enrollment exemption. So it talks about what's your loss from those two numbers, previous 3-year average to new 3-year average, and you see 41. And then it takes 41 times the per member amount of $10,460.15, and it gives you this declining enrollment exemption. And I'm pointing that out in detail here because this is going to be our problem again next year. So right now we have this number given back to us over here on the right in line 10B. In 10B as in boy, that declining enrollment exemption comes back into the formula and gets added back to the pot. And I think why this was developed a long time ago, I can't be for sure what was going through people's minds when this formula was developed, but we are in October. This budget started in July. It's too late if you have a significant decline like we did this year to make adjustments at this point. Contracts are out. Your year is 3 to 4 months in. So that is given back to the district to be able to keep our budgets the way that we planned on them going into this year. But next year, anything that is in this section 10, 10A through 10I, is called a non-recurring exemption, and it is then taken off your base as you project, as you go forward to the next year. There's also, we don't normally have this one, line 7B was another hold harmless non-recurring exemption. So there's 2 exemptions this year that basically were given to us to help us kind of keep up and stable to the amounts we have this year, but they're going away next year. Okay. The next page, page 52, is equalization aid. Page 53, I enjoy more because it's the longitudinal history of equalization aid. So a couple of lines I like to look at on the very top. You can see the general aid appropriation. That's for all the schools in the state of Wisconsin. So you can see again, what the amount has done, kind of going up in the most recent years, and that's more money was added to the pot again. And then there's a couple of lines mid-sheet, and it's percentages. And that shows me, when I look at it, if we got poorer than the state average or richer than the state average that particular year. And I had written it down, because I looked at it this year. 7 of the last 9 years we got poorer. So property value per student, 7 of the last 9 years when I looked at this sheet, we've been dropping, which means more state aid. But when you think about the reason behind it, I'm not sure it's a great reason. Okay. Page 55 is now what shakes out mathematically in that budget. So again, September FTE dropped by 90. Summer school FTE dropped by 9. Summer school FTE is this weird thing, it only counts as 40%. So you take all the kids you have, and then there's a calculation of how many minutes it is equals 1 FTE, and then even that is then multiplied by 0.4 because it's summer school and not regular school. Revenue limit total again, you see, and then I go into some of these declining enrollment exemptions. And what's really strange is not only do they give you back the money this year that I was talking about in those exemptions, but it actually, because of the way the calculation works and it's only a 3-year average, actually end up even with a little bit more. So you can see that like this year in 2021, we ended up $119,000 more, but watch out in that column 21-22. We were projecting declining enrollment, but this year was a bigger decline, so it's 345 coming off, 119 coming off. That's over and above, again, the regular deficits that we always talk about. Open enrollment in, I haven't gotten to that yet, and then again, I'll touch on it in the business manager report. Open enrollment was good right now in the count. We had less go out than we had projected in the budget. So we gained 68,550 there, and we had more come in than I had budgeted. So we had 143,000 of gain there. So on that page 55, one of the bigger gains helping us is open enrollment out and open enrollment in. Another loss on that sheet, there's a per pupil aid. Well, again, our count is down, so we lost 23,000 on that one, almost 24,000. So this, what all this shakes out to is second paragraph, there's an overall gain this year of 230,000 in the budget right now, okay? Again, next year, it's gonna be the regular $400,000 to $500,000 deficit plus a lot of these extra declining enrollments. We might be facing 800,000 to $1 million, okay? I have a workshop in November where we sit down all day, make all the projections, make all the roll forwards, and, you know, I'll have a number for you of what it'll actually be, but keep in mind, again, we won't know the state budget. And one of the other things we'll talk about is, so we decline this year enrollment. Are we gonna project it going back up? Or are we gonna say, we've probably lost those kids and they're gonna stay out? That's gonna matter too on what the number looks like that we end up projecting. So bottom line, I'll be able to give a range of numbers, like what if the state budget comes in at -200? What if it comes in at 0? What if it comes in at 200? What if we lose these kids forever? What if they get back on the formula? So I have a range, but we'll have to, you know, pick a number that we're comfortable with proceeding with next year's budget based upon, again, all of those factors. So when all this shook out, again, 230,000 this year that we had positively in the budget right now. And on the bottom of page 55, we're basically holding that right now. And here's all the things it could be used for. There's still talk of reducing this year's budget because of lower revenues. How they're talking of doing it is still possibly the per pupil aid, which doesn't come till spring, and or the special education aid. That's part of the increases in our budget this year. Maybe that won't come true. And maybe also it's a some certain amount, and if a lot of districts have exceeded that some certain amount, not everybody's gonna get 30%, everybody might get like 28%. Are we gonna have more COVID-related costs? Are we gonna try to return it to the 400,000 we're already overspending this year? Are we going to offset next year's decline with that 230,000? Or are we gonna do long-term maintenance projects either just this year or continuing ongoing, like take that 230, put that in the budget. Right now, on this piece of paper that I'm asking you to approve tonight, the final budget, it's temporarily slotted into maintenance. I had to put it somewhere, had to code it somewhere, but we need a lot more conversations about where it's gonna end up in the future. Andy knows that, he's not gonna spend it yet, okay? And that is it. So I'm gonna say again, other questions on the levy or on the original budget as presented tonight? My computer died, so I'm gonna log back in. I know I threw a lot at you there. I'm tired too.
Questions?
motion, oh, and it's one of those more specific motions, I apologize. The auditors at one point said, you really got to get the levy approved by fund. So on the bottom of page 42, yep, if you can read, and then we combine the approval of the levy with the official, like, there needs to be an original budget approved. So it's that line on the bottom of 42.
I will make the motion to approve the total tax levy of Fund 10 to $13,029,288, to Fund 39 of $2,187,734, and the Fund 80 of $256,328, for a total tax levy of $15,473,350, and approve the 2020-2021 original budget as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Any questions, other questions or discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Kathy. All right, next item, Start College Now Early College Credit Programs for the second semester.
Beginning on page 56, you will find the applications that have been submitted. We only received them for Start College Now. So if you remember, that is a program that allows 11th and 12th graders to take college courses at Wisconsin technical colleges. We have 8 different applications, and there was definitely a pattern in the courses that were requested. So it's macroeconomics and microeconomics, business law, English comp, speech, and certified nursing program. Keep in mind, you will see in there we have the process that the students and their parents need to follow for the application, and the responsibility form is also included. Just as a reminder, we started that last year, so everyone's well aware of the program and the guidelines. You will notice that some students asked for more than one course. That doesn't mean they're going to take them. It all has to do with scheduling, but we do the approval. The district pays for a total of 18 post-secondary credits. So that includes early college credit and Start College Now. So if a student took advantage of both of them, because the early college credit starts in 9th grade, they would have only up to 18. Anything above that would be the responsibility of the family. So there is a cap on it. So we just need approval. This would be for the spring semester.
A motion to approve the Start College Now applications as presented.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion?
Nope.
One quick thing. At last month's meeting, there was a public participation session, and there was talk. One of the community members mentioned the fact that we should be doing things like this. It was specifically brought up. I think this is just a good opportunity. This is not new this year.
Nope.
This is something we've been doing, and I think we just need, when these opportunities come up and we have these kids doing these, it's a great opportunity just to remind people here, people in the community, that these opportunities are here, and we want them to take advantage of them, so.
To your credit too, it was also related to the YA, the Youth Apprenticeship Program, which I think, Stacy, you said we had like 140 kids or something like that? 40. 140? 40? 40, sorry. 40 kids who participate in that.
All right, if there's no other discussion, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item, COVID-19 update and review reentry handbook.
All right. So let me start with a few things in the reentry handbook, and we'll just work our way around it a little bit. As always, I just want to reiterate a couple things within the handbook. First of all, from a standpoint of the school board, if we as a district deem that we need to make a regular change in regards to compliance, in regards to any of DPI's expectations via PI codes, then we would have to apply for a waiver, but that would need board action. So I want the board to understand, if we were to make if we cannot meet a certain DPI code this year, let's say instructional minutes, and I'm not saying that, but I'm just using that as an example, any type of code that we need to adjust regularly to that, so we know we're not going to meet that, and it's going to be done consistently throughout the year, then we'll need to come back and have discussion at the board level to apply for a waiver. If we're doing something flexible, so we're not intentionally saying we're going to do this all year long, we don't think we're going to purposely not meet a requirement via DPI. DPI is stating then we don't need to apply for the waiver this year due to the fact they're providing much flexibility to a district. So it's more about what's your intent, and do you know if you're going to be doing it year-long, and you know that most likely whatever that action is year-long, then take it to the board to have a discussion and seek a permanent waiver for the year. So right now, at this time, we're not seeking any permanent waiver. If we, like we said, I mean, we've been doing some flexibility, but we think we're going to be meeting most of the requirements if things stay as they are. If not, then we'll come back and have that discussion later. But I wanted to make sure people understood that due to the fact you're hearing some districts having to apply for waivers already. That's because of the actions they've already taken, and they're saying, we anticipate doing that year-long. And so that's why they're doing it and we're not at this point in time. Other things within the handbook, pretty much the things that I always point out, but I will constantly keep reminding people of that, and that is the health and safety recommendations after the last board meeting, which is on page 14 in our current handbook. We talked about face coverings, and prior to that, we had addressed it to the mandate. And you'll notice via our last discussion, now the language has changed. We changed the verbiage, which says the East Troy Community School District will require face coverings and will continue to reassess as needed throughout the school year. This reassessment may occur monthly and may occur at regularly scheduled board meetings. At this time, this requirement includes every student, early childhood and 4K through 12 grades will be wearing a face covering if they are indoors or in an enclosed space. And another person or persons who are not members of an individual's household or living unit are present in the same room or enclosed space. So we've adjusted that from the mandate language due to the fact that we had stated at our last board meeting that we no longer were going to, obviously we're not operating outside the mandate, but we said at this time, East Troy School District is requiring face coverings. And we're going to allow that to be a discussion at a board level for when the time comes when we say, look, does administration have a recommendation? Does administration want to talk to us about it? If you guys would like to bring it up, I always have it on the topic, so if you want to have dialogue on that, when I get through this, you may. But again, at this point in time, we're saying we're just going to keep following through with where we're at. But I wanted to bring that up, and it will continue to be brought up. On page 17, the close contacts, I can't stress enough. I say it in every video, every memo that I write, and that is what is our definition of close contact, and how do we go about identifying if one is meeting close contact, which obviously, from a school district standpoint, will result in quarantine. And what does that mean? So I wanted people to understand that, which we've stayed consistently to. Page 18, the illness during the school day. We have so many scenarios. I'm not going to go through them all. But on page 18, the illness during the school day, those are the ones that will result in that people may be seeing from a discussion with our building level administration, and that is where a probable letter or a possible letter is now sent to the parents if one is being identified in that area. So probable and possible letters are two different letters, obviously. I won't go into detail. If you have a question on those, feel free to ask the administration, but obviously they're significantly different, those letters. One is about when they're symptom-free, which is the possible and coming back. The other one, probable, is more serious. Obviously, they're meeting one of the three big areas, or they're meeting multiple other of the minor illnesses, symptoms that are demonstrated that are related to COVID. And then there's different things that they would have to do, either possibly being quarantined for the 14 days and or getting tested prior to coming back into the school district and school building. One of the scenarios we added, which I mentioned in the most recent video, is the experiencing of loss or taste and or smell of if a student has that symptom. At one point in time, we did not have this scenario, but due to the fact this scenario, this symptom is so strongly related to COVID, not necessarily fully, but obviously a strong possibility of having COVID if a child or an adult has lost taste or smell, that we felt that we needed to add this scenario due to the fact that at one point in time, we were treating it as all other symptoms, and we said we need to treat this symptom even to a higher degree. With that, what we're saying is if a child were to be experiencing this symptom now, any sibling of that family would also be sent home until that child has been tested and is not demonstrating the symptoms any longer. So if that child who's symptomatic gets tested and is negative, their siblings absolutely may come back immediately. Siblings. The individual would still need to wait until symptom-free and everything else. So we just wanted to add that due to the fact that's a new one at this time. Another big one that I'll point out is our dashboard, which we now have on our district. I would prefer to have a different type of dashboard, and I don't mean like I love our dashboard on COVID. I mean I would like to have it be on achievement and academia and learning rather than about COVID itself, which is honestly a dashboard we're going to be talking about in time to try and see something about that. But unfortunately, in this circumstance, it's a dashboard on our COVID positivities or quarantine at this time. What I want to stress is there are no more letters being provided by me in regards to any positive case per the district at a building or district-wide. The dashboard now is live. It's being updated every 4 hours. So when there's new information being provided, that'll be refreshed every 4 hours. So it's a fairly live dashboard. And we feel that that allows parents to see it more obviously real time, not waiting to see if someone has read my letter or not read my letter, and which area it applies to for them. So if your child has still been assessed to have been a close contact, you will be getting notified via phone call and a letter still by that building level administrator. So we wanted to make sure we pointed that out. On page 21, you know, not many people have inquired. I think we took care of this a few board meetings ago, but how will schools be determined to be closed? It's a multifaceted approach, and not one more than another is more important. Obviously, we're looking at it from a standpoint of what is occurring within a grade level, a cohort, a building, to the district itself. And we'd be looking at that information. And when I say that, we'd probably be using a lot of the framework of Walworth County in regards to their framework in regards to schools and remaining open or closing. It's not a requirement, it's a guidance. And what is some of those things in that guidance? Well, we've had these discussions already when we've had cases. And that is, are we looking at a single case? Or are we looking at a multitude of cases? Do we know where the case is originating from or cases? So is there a link? And when there's not a link, that's when we become a little more concerned. When we can identify where the link is, the main nucleus of where it originated, then that makes us feel a little more comfortable about what we're dealing with. Do we have, honestly, a large transmission occurring that we have no idea why? And then we need to address that and take a break. And then we also are we're constantly looking at our attendance rates and what is occurring with our attendance rates from a standpoint of obviously illness and health. And on a weekly basis, we're taking a look at those rates. So not even over a 14-day, weekly basis, and seeing, do we have a large number of kids absent, and is it due to illness, and then why? So those are all the things, and we look at all of those constantly, daily and weekly, toward determining whether or not is there anything that needs to be done or concerned about. With some of that, some other things that I thought would be relevant tonight is, I'll try to take them in order, and that is, so as of today, the 19th, and these were just taken off of our dashboard by me at about 5:30, so before I even came over here. So these are some numbers that I think, data that's I think is very important since the school year started. Again, I stress since school year started because there are things over the summer that are not included in these numbers. So since the school year started, which was September 1st till now, our district total right now, if you were to look at the dashboard live, are 8 positives. And to break that down, 2 at Little Prairie, 1 at Prairie View, 3 at the middle school, 1 at the high school. Now, you might go, Dr. Himner, you need to work on your math, that's only 7. Okay, I want to explain that. So this is a staff and students dashboard. We've combined. All right, so we are not purposely singling out our staff and or our students, and we want to make sure of any cell size issue. So as you can see, those are by buildings, but we have district, we are district-wide. Not everybody fits into a building. So we have a lot of staff that go between buildings. We have a lot of support staff that aren't in a building. And we have a central office that's not necessarily in, I mean, we're in Dobeck, but if I were to identify Dobeck itself, our cell size is very small. So it'd be very possible you're identifying now the individual by my data that I'm providing. So what we're doing is trying to combine it enough that it's informational, but not identifying an individual. So that's the reason why you might see 7 per building, but 8 positives. Yes, you can come to the conclusion then it's probably something that can't be identified to a specific building, someone. We have 39 quarantine in district exposures, and we have 60 quarantine non-district exposures. So again, what does that mean from a staff student perspective? Those are, again, to close contact tracing, and whether or not has the close contact, was it occurring from the positive case within the school, or was it occurring as an exposure outside of the school that resulted in close contact? So we are doing, and our aides, health room aides, our teachers, our school nurses and our school nurse, and our building level administrators, let me just state this for the record, deserve so much credit for what they are doing. I mean, besides, obviously, we're not trying to make this year be about all this data, right? We're not trying to make it be about just always following through on COVID and saying it was a successful year. We're here to learn, and we're here to provide that environment to make sure learning is occurring. But with that being said, I think you can tell there's some time components to this. And as I had a discussion with somebody on the phone the other day with a parent who called me up, and I appreciate their inquiry, they were a little concerned about the 39 quarantine in-district exposure and the 60 out-of-district. And I said, actually, I look at it not from a concern standpoint. I think it's a huge credit to our district standpoint. Because I said, I look at the positives a lot. But I said, the close contacts are important. Like, we need to follow up. We need to make sure, are they ever becoming positive? But I said, our staff really, I said, as a parent, you should feel more comfortable, because what it tells me is our staff is doing a really thorough job of doing the investigations and questionings into the close contact. And we are identifying kids early in a preventative measure for the benefit of everybody else. And I think that's a huge compliment to our staff. In some counties, the counties themselves are doing the close contacts, not so much the schools. And I understand why it's questionable in every county. That is not an insult to other counties or an insult to our county or a compliment one way or the other. I will tell you at first, it's funny how your mind changes over time. My mind has evolved 180 on so many different topics. At first, and I think the principals probably would agree with me, I at first was like, I wish the county had complete control of the close contacts moons ago. Like, I mean, let them do the close contact. Now I will tell you, no. I mean, I'm glad we have this relationship and we're working really tight together, and they give us a lot of feedback, and we're always informing them if we find out about a positive or if they find out about a positive in the community. But I like it that we're directly involved and quickly involved in the close contact tracing, due to the fact we have probably that closer relationship to the kids and families and parents, and we know about it sooner. And so a little bit of it is a trusting relationship. So I think that extra preventative measure is good that it's at our level. I really do believe that. So, but a credit to all those people and that I recognize, due to the fact this would not be going nearly as successful if they were not putting in their due diligence and time. And I can tell you, those aren't all easy conversations when you're having to call up somebody and telling them that their child has been in a possible exposure, they're meeting our close contact, and by the way, you're going to be quarantined for 14 days. I mean, that's an inconvenience, not only to the child, to the family. But we recognize those are the conversations we have to do. So I also would like to do a shout out to the families, because from what I've heard up to this point in time, they've been very supportive and understanding of those conversations. So that goes a long ways for us continuing this. Second thing is East Troy community, per the Walworth County, I think I receive updates every 2 weeks from Walworth County in regards to our school district geographical boundary. All right, so boundary. And what I mean by that is, so I'll give you a little background. So, excuse me, from 810 to 823, within the school district geographical boundaries of East Troy, we were identified at that time of being moderately high with 25 confirmed cases. 826 to 98, we were then identified as being moderate with 14 confirmed cases. September 9th through September 22nd, we went back up to moderately high with 27 confirmed cases. And from September 23rd to October 6th, and I'm bringing this up because these are components that I have to continue to assess along with what's happening in our district. From September 23rd to October 6th, we now have gone into a high standpoint with 42 confirmed cases. So that's a case rate, I'll just use the last one, that case rate over those 2 weeks is 36.20, which, if you're wondering about the metrics, the way it works is it's a number of cases per 10,000 by school district geographical boundaries. So to give you an idea, so if you're like, well, where do they draw that line from a standpoint of moderate to moderate high to high to crisis, to be quite frank, or critical, I guess is the other terminology they use. 0 to 9 for a case rate, not just confirmed case. 0, because obviously it's going by 10,000. 0 to 9 for a case rate would be considered low over a 2-week period. 10 to 19 is what they consider moderate over the 2-week period. 20 to 29 is what they consider moderate high. 30 to 49 is what they consider high for the case rate, not again the confirmed cases, case rate. And then 50 plus is what they would consider critical at that point in time. So every 2 weeks I get those updated reports to try to monitor it a little bit. And then one of the things we ask for, which I really appreciate Walworth County doing now in the last 2 reports, is we ask for it by age populace. So because I think that's really important for us to also look at it from an age populace. So if we're in the high, how much of that age populace is within our school district populace too? So we have begun to look at all those things. We also, another one that I wanted to bring to your attention was just attendance in general. This is attendance for all kids. So currently at this time, we're at 93.96% attendance rate. So if you were to ask me, so what's each building, Chris, I could give you that information, but I'll just state it this way. So 93% or above at every single building for attendance rates is what we're at this point in time. From a beginning of the year, we're monitoring and watching our virtual and in-person. I think that's another important data point for all of us to always be aware of. And I'll be frank, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if that data point changes over time, right? I mean, we've seen it adjust a little bit to more in-person than virtual at the beginning of the year. And hopefully it stays that way. But I do think if, unfortunately, I will say if there happens to be a more positivity rate, we could see that adjust a different direction, right? I do think that we might want to talk about that over holidays even, right? And encouragement. We've said that before. So right now, at the beginning of the year, we had 28 students that chose virtual at Little Prairie, which we shared this information when we were going to in-person and virtual. Prairie View was 35, middle school was 39, and high school was 45. If I did my math right, 147. And now on 10/19, as of today, we have at Little Prairie 33, so they have gone up 5 more for in the virtual. Again, that could be due to enrollment influx too. I have not gone into the detail of maybe their enrollment went up and they chose virtual, a new family came in. Prairie View are at 19 students, so they're down 16 students. 16 students have gone from virtual over to in-person. 39 from the middle school is now down to 35. So they've gone down 4, so they've had 4 transition from virtual to in-person. In the high school, which began at 45, is up to 50 virtual, so they've gone up 5. Again, is that truly students that started, or is it a family? I didn't go into all the details. I'm just looking at the number itself, in itself. So basically, at the beginning of the year, we had 147 kids virtually, and now we're at 137 kids virtually for the year. Bus transportation, if I can find quickly. Our capacity on our buses is, as Craig has mentioned many a times, is 1,226, which is basically 3 riders per seat because we have 24 seats, right? And I will tell you, I've never been a huge fan of that prior to COVID, right? That you had 3 students in a seat, but it is what it is. I understand that. Definitely not a fan of that at all now in the COVID era, unfortunately, right? So we said at the beginning of the school year, transportation was going to have to be a core focal point for us to do our mitigation measures correctly. And we said at the very least, we wanted 2 to a seat, if not less than that, to be quite frank. The first weeks of school in the AM, we had a total of 418 kids choosing to do bus transportation. In the PM, we had 508. Now, at this past week of the school year, we are down to 402 kids riding the bus from 418 the first week. But we actually in the PM are up. So we went from 508 the first week, and now we are up to 534 in the PM. So the AM's gone down a little, but the PM has gone up, and there's probably different theories of why we could come up with in regards to that. The one thing I'm proud to say is, of all the routes, we only have one route, that has 48. So we have 2 in a seat. Other than that, we do not have a single other route, even in the 40s now this past week. So that I am proud of. Now, again, obviously, if people start choosing more of the transportation, but obviously we would have to adjust. And as Craig shared at the last board meeting, we know that if our drivers are not available for whatever reason, right, we always have issues, to be quite frank, on the bus driving side from a standpoint of substitute drivers. Not with our drivers, but substitute drivers. There's not a huge supply of bus drivers anywhere in the state or nationally. So with that being said, if we end up having any issues on the transportation side from a standpoint of absences due to health reasons or anything else, and we know under the current circumstances, it could result in a quarantine of 14 days that somebody would not be available or longer, right? So Craig shared that at the last board meeting, and I'm proud of that, but that we do have alternative plans in place that we have shared already with families, all families that take the bus, whether or not they are now or not, in regards to what that would be. So we've shared our alternative plans with them, so I just want you to know those things have been already planned, communicated, if we would need to go that route with all families. I guess the final thing that I just share really quick, or 2 other things, would be, I think at this point in time, if getting through almost, hopefully now, the first 2 months of the school year, maybe I'm being optimistic that I already jumped to 2 months, but would be, we said this in August or even in July, and that was, I think our challenge currently is going to always be able to be about maintaining high-quality substitute staff for many different positions, whether that be on the support staff side, and I use the transportation bus drivers as one example, or whether it be within the classroom on the teaching side. Or, if it happens to be something of our administrators are gone for a certain point of time. Quality substitutes are going to be the key. And I can already tell you it's not just an educated guess. It's something that in the last week, I will give as an example, I was looking at that substitute list every day in regards to how many people were out. And it's not necessarily all related to just COVID, don't get me wrong there by any means. It's just normal absences, right? But in regards to today's environment too, some of it is related to COVID, that our staff's doing what we want. And that is they're staying home if they're questioning their health, right? It's not necessarily a positive case or a quarantine, but they're staying home like we've encouraged them. But I will tell you, we also don't have the substitute list we once had. So when you look at the substitute list, you might see, oh, they've got 23-ish people who are willing to substitute in this district for, let's say, as classroom teachers. But we don't, because not all 23 are willing to at this time. It's gone down quite a bit at this time. Some, due to the fact they're like, we're waiting. We want to wait some months and see. Others, they have something within their personal life that's really of significance to them, and they're like, I can't risk being a close contact. I need to go to this event. And so they're like, going into a school makes it a little more risky for me to be a close contact, more or less possibly, and, unintended exposure. We get that. But it is causing issues on our end. Like, we have a large-scale list of how we go about filling positions right now. And it goes all the way down to, like, okay, if we can't find substitutes, regular substitutes, we have to start looking internally. Encores might have to move from an encore class into a regular class. Maybe we'll have to, at the middle school and high school, maybe it's just for one section. Elementary, it could be a day, right? We get into looking into other support staff who just have their bachelor's. And we're like, look, we know you didn't apply for this, but you're going into this role for the next day or two. All the way down to the building level principal, all the way over to central office, and central office filling in. Those are all short-term solutions, which we're all very willing to do here. What the goal here is to buy time, to be quite frank. So if that short-term solution, I recognize, is becoming a long-term problem, then we need to think about something alternative. We need to adjust. I bring that up due to the fact that would be when discussions have to happen about, so are we struggling at a buildings, and not that we want to, but that's when a discussion would be all of a sudden about, do we have to make a shift at a building for a little while, or a grade level, or buildings? And I've said all along from day one, right, that it'll be more upon, can we find quality professionals always to be doing our operations, probably than it will be on the student side. I've always thought that in regards to this current situation. So I just want to bring that up. And due to that fact, again, I want people to know we're trying to stay always one step ahead. So as an administrative team, we've been having discussions. I mean, we've shared in our handout, right, that we have a lot of different operational considerations. We aren't thinking about going to any other operational consideration at this time. Please don't think that I'm implying anything by it. But I want people to know that we're at least always talking about it, thinking about it, so we're planning for it, right? So we have talked about, what does intermittent virtual look like if we ever have to do that? We've talked about that. We had it as an operational consideration, but we also want to make sure we have all the logistics work out if we have to. So people aren't delayed with it. We're not spending days getting ready for it, that we can make the transition smoothly, seamlessly, for the benefit of students learning, parents, and everything else. So we're having those dialogues and discussions. And again, not because we're anticipating it happening, but you know what, we're prepping just in case. We want to be ready, and we want everyone else to be ready. So we're working out all those details now. And again, it's called intermittent for a reason. We've said from day one, our goal is always to be here. Our goal is always to get back here. But I don't think we're doing our due diligence if we don't have that all worked out to the best of our ability too. So we are putting our time in on that, and I just want people to know it. And so I think families probably in the next week to 2 weeks can expect a letter from me, to be quite frank, and all the administrators in regards to, so what is intermittent virtual, like you guys mentioned in your handbook, you got a little more details worked out? Yes, we do. Again, nobody needs to go, oh, there it is, there's a transit. No. What it is there it is, the district's representing again. We're hopefully staying ahead, and we're letting people know how it will work so they can feel a little more comfortable if all of a sudden they do receive a notification, that they understand exactly what it means for them, and that things go smoothly for everybody. I think that's probably the major parts. One thing I want to also say, I think this deserves a lot of recognition, and this goes out to Bob Ellis and Andy Daniels, because they both were heavily involved in this, and that is the bipolar ionization system that we installed into all of the buildings. And I would have stated, I think we should do this no matter if we would have had the COVID situation or not, but COVID just forced it for us to say we're doing it. And obviously there was some monies involved in that, but I think this is great news to read something like this. So Andy had done a test with some individuals, and so he sent this out to the whole staff, and I think this is great for the staff to hear this. But as many of you know, our mechanical contractor and I visited each building this past week as we tested the air in numerous rooms and areas to identify how well the GPS bipolar ionization system was working. I'm not going to read it all. The objective was to sample rooms and areas while occupied with students, without students, small areas, large areas, offices, corridors, health, and isolation rooms. A quick reminder of what the ionization system does is it generates positive and negative ions that attack the DNA/RNA of organisms, both airborne and on surfaces, while also removing hydrogen from those organisms, therefore killing the organism. In this case, we are using it to kill viruses, but are reaping all the other benefits such as reducing airborne allergens and odors. The test equipment was used to sample the air was looking for these negative and positive ions. Without the system, we would have essentially 0 negative and positive ions. With the equipment, we were looking for an optimal range of 5,000 to 6,000 ions combined between the positive and negative ions. We sampled the exterior to use as a base, which was not necessary, but it proved that there are very few of these negative and positive ions in spaces where the system is not installed. The sample we took showed that we had some negative and positive ions outdoors, but we were under 100. Again, the optimal range is 5,000 to 6,000 total ions. After conducting our tests in a variety of rooms district-wide, we are excited to report that within the new system is performing at a high and an excellent level. In most cases, we are far above the optimal level. And I'll let Andy talk about it in particular if you'd like. Moreover, the analysis is the system is working just great. Again, the system combined with the antimicrobial treatment and follow-up treatments have us in a position to mitigate and or prevent the spread of not just the COVID virus, but so many of the other seasonal viruses we experience. However, while this feels good, or I feel good about this, we will need not become complacent, I couldn't agree more with that, as we will continue to monitor what we have done and look for other ways to continue to control the elements so we can control and provide all the occupants a healthy educational environment. I just think Andy's here if you need to ask him any more specific questions about that, but a credit to the board in giving the green light for us to have that installed. Due to the fact that, there's so many mitigation measures that are done that we recognize when you come in, right? You see the kids visually 6 feet apart as best we can. You see barriers when you go into the classrooms. You're seeing the face coverings, but you know what? That's an unseen one, right? And it's a huge one. I mean, that is a big one that might be one of the biggest mitigation measures that has been done that is helping our district to have success. So I appreciate that. I also think you deserve a lot of credit in when I mentioned the issues with substitutes, recognizing and approving before we ever had an issue, the 4 full-time substitute teachers for this year. And by the way, when I say we are in substitute, it's a concern and a challenge. That is with our four full-time, right? So I bring that up because that might be a little hint that I may be coming back. And we might be talking about more general educational aides or another full-time substitute teacher here or there due to the fact that that's what's needed for us to maintain consistency in our programming. Then I think we should have a dialogue on it, but just not at this time. We're not there. I think that's primarily the COVID update, if anybody has any questions.
I have a quick one, Chris. The chart before you were talking about as of October 6th, where we put us at 42 cases, is that just like an informational stat, or is there some kind of recommendations that go along with where you fall during those periods?
Yeah, no, there's no recommendations for that. It's literally just a data point to share with us. So they look at it from a standpoint, they know as a school district, we're supposed, it's not a requirement, but it's encouraged that we're looking at it just not from our district data, but from a community data. And that they want us to be aware is there an issue going on possibly in the geographical area of the community that you need to be aware of in the district? And then are you seeing, like, if we have a concern already going on in the district a little bit, and let's say all of a sudden as a community, we're in that high to, I said critical, then we might need to be really seriously talking about something, because now the community's in a high level, and the district already was feeling that there was maybe a transmission issue going on within the district. So then we would need to talk about what we're gonna do.
Have we seen any around us hit critical and saw their reaction to it yet?
From different school districts, you
Yeah.
mean, or different
Yeah,
communities?
different.
There has been I don't know about critical, well, it depends on, there has been some that are very, that have been high. I don't want to name the district itself, but I mean, I think it's quite easy to understand a little bit. Some of that was at one point in time because you brought a lot of university students into the equation. So, I mean, I think that, I think some people would say, well, wait a minute, should they looked at the university maybe a little separately from the whole community itself, but some people would say, well, no, that university was part of the community, so that district wasn't far away from our district.
Okay.
But that, that's no longer as high as it once was for that district.
There is a district, in fact, there's a story in the Journal Sentinel today, and people can go and look at it if they want to, but that was the primary statistic that they used to determine. They went virtual today for the first time, and they think they're going to be virtual for 2 to 3 weeks. And their statement was because they had reached a point in time, and they decided this months ago. They said months ago this was the formula they were going to use, and once they got into the high, I think it was the high category, they were going to use that as their decision to switch to a virtual format. So some districts are using it, but again, that was a decision they made quite a while ago. And I mean, a lot of data has changed, a lot of information.
And I think a lot of those districts, Bob, some of those ones that I do know that are in certain counties, those counties had metrics that set up. So those metrics were very well aligned already, saying, and again, indifferent about what's the right way. But some of those school districts are in counties where they said, look, this is the metrics that you're going to use. And you're going to use that information. So when you reach that data point, we as a county are already telling you, you're going to a virtual model.
And this was one where the superintendent was quoted as saying that it was the district decision. Now, that may have been it's a district decision, but we're doing it because
Yeah.
they didn't get that deep into it, so.
Yeah. And I will be honest, not that anybody really cares about my opinion on it, but I will say I like it that we have a balanced approach. That as the county's working with us really well. I really appreciate Walworth County's Health Department working with us well. And it's a balanced approach. Like, look at your district, Chris. Look at your data in your district. What's going on? You know it better than we do at the county level. And then we're providing you information about what's happening in your community from the county level. And then you guys are going to have to make decisions based on that. I will say it's up to this point in time, I've appreciated that balanced approach by them.
There's no other discussion. We'll move on to the next item. Referendum planning towards development of possible referendum question. See, Kathy's got a sheet here with some options to look at.
In time to get you this in your packet, so it's not in the packet, but it's by your name tag, upper right corner here. And at the last board meeting, we brought up a future agenda item of possible referendum or beginning the discussion again. So you can take it a different direction if you want, but this is also kind of a starting point that we thought maybe would help guide tonight's discussion. Part A up there, and you can see the title is Referendum or Not 2021. So we're not saying go to referendum or not go to referendum, but purely for discussion. Part A, a philosophy that we need to decide upon in determining, again, the number for the referendum. And I told you earlier I would give you a range of what these different calculations are going to look like. But we are down in that resident membership. And again, some of it we would have been down anyway. because we're on a trend for declining enrollment. If you recall that slide for the annual meeting, it goes like this. It went like that this year. So when we went down the 80 to 90 kid number, again, depending upon if you're looking at head count or residents, I really, on this chart, only have 66 because some of them we would have lost anyway, okay? But if we are saying there's 66 more kids that we lost this year in the special circumstance of COVID probably, are we going to think we're gonna get them back next year if there's a vaccine, and are they gonna re-enroll? Or are they, again, gone forever to the district? If they decided to homeschool this year, they're gonna be homeschooled, or they decided on some other form of education, that's what's gonna happen. We have talked internally already, and we're saying we recommend that they're coming back up. Not because, we just had another discussion, not because we don't believe education is gonna be changed forever and the way we do things is gonna be different, but if we continue to project them out, we're gonna get a really large deficit number. And we don't want it to be a scare tactic for the referendum, bottom line. So if we proceed to go to referendum, we're probably gonna chart that our enrollment goes back up, getting a less severe number, because again, we don't want people to say, well, those kids could come back and you're overestimating the amount that you need. So just a thought, again, something for discussion here on the first night. Part B, then on this sheet, besides the philosophies, like we said, we have to think about what we're gonna calculate. We have some general paths. One, we could seek a referendum in April 2021. 2, we could utilize fund balance. 3, we could continue making reductions and balancing the budget every year. Those are like the big headers that we have. Number 1, seek a referendum in April 2021. We could keep the previous referendum as it was. Points we were making here internally, we still need it. The operations amount may need to be even higher, but our first operations number that we were proposing didn't fully cover the annual deficits either, because we were trying to stick with a feasible tax increase. So, if we go back with the same kind of referendum that we had before, because our operating numbers have gotten worse, it's again gonna cover even less of the operations, but it's gonna be still something. Part B, we could reduce maintenance from the overall referendum. That would make you could go different ways here. You could either make the overall referendum a smaller number if we felt it didn't pass before because it was too high of a number, or same number but give more room for operations. And Andy is here tonight, and he can give you a little maintenance update on, again, some facts and numbers he's been looking at. But the item there, any way you slice it in Part B, is that option would focus more of our referendum efforts on operations and less on maintenance. B1C, you could spread maintenance in the long-term bond. We were trying to do the maintenance within the 5-year question for a couple reasons. One, we thought 2 questions would complicate the vote. 2, as soon as you switch to a bond, a long-term bond, it calculates interest, or it costs interest on top of the cost of the projects already. So we were trying to avoid that as well. But again, if that's one option, we could put 2 questions out there, separate the maintenance into a second question, and we could spread it out over a greater number of years. It would be a smaller number. On any of those options, A, B, or C, there's a letter there, D, that says note, and that is what I was trying to explain, probably not so well because it's complicated, but there is a possibility for debt restructuring that will help offset the cost of the referendum this time around. Due to low current interest rates, we're 1 year closer to callable debt. We can escrow and refinance. There's a possibility, again, that will help offset the cost to the taxpayer. Path number 2, the fund balance utilization. Sounds like an easy answer. Bob, you had asked me a board meeting earlier, how long would our district be solvent, basically? So if we make no cuts, and that's on our Baird forecasting model that we always do, that 5-year projection, we'd have about 4 years before we'd be sitting in board meetings like Palmyra Eagle was last year, deciding to dissolve or not. You basically have 4 years of running out the fund balance because you have, let's say you have to make $500,000 of cuts every year. If you don't make the cuts in year 1, then it's 500,000 plus another 500,000 the next year. So now the next year you're behind $1 million, and that just compounds. And again, pretty soon you're broke, and you have to make a decision at that point whether you're going to close your doors or what you're going to do. Number 3, again, continue making reductions to operations. What we have done every year, we make the reductions, positions, salary reductions, insurance changes and reductions. I put a note there, like insurance, this is, as I'm thinking about this, I go, this is the hard part. We won't even know our insurance numbers. We can't even go out to bid for a July insurance until, again, January, February, realistically. So we'll be setting this referendum and not knowing some good, again, insurance numbers. So we'll have to go with what we know when we know it, and make adjustments on the fly. And then I put, and yes, there are other areas, because every time I talk about positions, salaries, and insurance, I get, well, what about if we cut a bus? Or what about if we, yes, there's other things, but positions, salaries, insurance are the big 3. They're the big 3 that, again, I'm not gonna put a label on it, but that's a majority of your budget. So yes, you can reduce paper, but it's not gonna get you to balance $500,000 to $1 million. And then the other conversation that we've had before, do we make additional reductions even beyond the revenue cap gap? I love that phrase, the difference between, again, what we're going to have in the revenue cap formula and what we need to operate our budgets. Do we go even further? Because if we don't pass a referendum with some maintenance projects in it, well, then are you telling us we need to put that into our budget, which then means that's even greater cuts to add money to the maintenance budget to do those projects within our own funding. So do we take that, again, $500,000 to $1 million and make it 1.5 million of cuts, 2 million? Like, I can't even fathom that as it's coming out of my mouth, but that's what it would take to get those maintenance projects into our regular budgets. So that's an overview of the sheet, and I'm going to leave it to you guys to talk here now and start your discussion, okay?
I guess, Andy, could you kind of, I'm assuming you looked at Bob's maintenance plan that we talked about last year. Have you had a chance to look at it in detail and have any ideas?
Yeah, so really looking at a lot of the studies that he had done, and also looking at how he worked with Kathy and Chris on how he would utilize that money if that referendum had passed. I would say I can confirm a lot of that work was legitimate, and the numbers overall are pretty good. I can give you, like, I continue to do some more work just to verify some of this for myself. So like when it comes to roofing, I work with one of our roofing consultants that Bob, I had used in the past, Bob was using as well. We have 84 roof sections in the district. 42 of them are underperforming at this point, where they're receiving a value of like 45 and under out of 100, where that equates to about $3-some million in the next 5 years. So replacement should happen within the next 5 years, and we can extend the life of those. And that's what I started doing with some preventative maintenance plans that we did with the roofing consultant. Yeah, I apologize. Sorry about that. Do I need to start over? We're good? Jess? Okay. I mean, ideally, for buildings and grounds director, business manager, you would love to take those 85 roof sections, which is about $8 million, and not have it come due as close together like we're seeing right now. So again, we're looking at $3-some million in 0 to 5 years, and then we have another 20-some roof sections due in the next 6 to 10 years, and then we got some beyond that. You'd rather stretch that all out. but you have $8 million worth of roofing in our district. Even if we extended that out, spread that out over 25 years, you're looking at $320,000 a year just to accomplish that, and that's the ideal situation. I don't know many districts of our size that have that capital set aside to do that kind of roofing. But nonetheless, in the next 0 to 5 years, we have $3.2 million that's been identified for replacement. And that doesn't even include, annual expenses to maintain them, to extend them, just to keep us safe from roof leaks and things like that, just in case we can't get the capital to do those. When it comes to mechanical systems, I have a list of about 126 main components on my list. Of those 126, we have something like 90 that are already beyond their life expectancy according to the ASHRAE standard. So it's something like 75%, I think, is already beyond the ASHRAE standard. And that's not necessarily the worst thing. Some of them are, motors and fans, all that stuff you can generally replace. I actually have a boiler system at Prairie View that's not even exceeded its life expectancy, but it's definitely two pieces of equipment that they're not beyond their life expectancy, but those boilers were lemons from the day that they were put in. A lot of districts put these in. The air cold boilers were something that somehow our reps and our contractors wanted to put them in the buildings, and they became nuisance, and it's getting harder and harder to get the parts. So even though it's not beyond the life expectancy, it's still like a high priority for me. Then I start looking at parking lot maintenance. I haven't had a chance to meet with any of the companies that Bob was working with or I was, but looking at the plans and the surveys that he did, I think we have 11 sections in our district, and 9 of them are due. I think 7 of them are due, because Little Prairie has 2 on its own, and obviously those are in good condition, plus all, the whole Prairie View parking lot, except for the front section needs some work. But that's a lot coming due at once. It's like 220. If I spread that out over 5 years, that's 225,000. And that, again, that's not even, I know I'm jumping back, but that's not even going into what it's really going to do, or what the needs are mechanically to replace some of the equipment, because you can't replace 90-some pieces of equipment, nor do you need to. But you got to get the high priority ones, like the boilers at Prairie View, the boilers at the high school, and then some other air handling equipment that is a higher priority as well. And then we didn't even talk about LED. So those first 3 that I just talked about, that's nothing that makes you feel good. It's not going into the classroom. It's not upgrades to the facilities. We're not going to get excited looking at new parking lots, right? So the only other thing that I, really started digging into is a LED. I had the whole survey, the whole district surveyed for LED. What I get excited about a little bit excited about over that is, we could do probably a $700,000 project to complete the entire district, which shows an operational savings about $60,000 a year. So a payback on an entire project is, I think fell right around 10 to 11 years on the payback. But that's operational savings that, we can pull out and put somewhere else even if we wanted to put it in the classroom. But again, that's $700,000 to $800,000. And then that doesn't even talk about Pete's building, where he's the only building in the district that really doesn't have an official secure entrance. And I think that came in, based on the Bob's research, was like $300,000. And again, that's not even doing some of the upgrades that we looked at in the plan previously, like science labs over at Pete's building, upgrades to the classrooms. Like I said, stuff that makes you really feel good and makes the community proud, which is where I would love to do a lot of these capital projects on our mechanical roofing, so that we can maybe start getting over that hump where we can start putting more dollars back into our buildings. That's really going to create that optimal learning environment for the school. So that's where we're at. Any questions?
So all the same issues?
I can confirm what Bob had, all his hard work. So
Haven't found any new big ones?
no, I'm very grateful we don't have major water issues, because I got out of that when I came here. So, but no, I haven't found any new issues. Good? All right, thank you.
Kathy, can you kind of describe this bond for maintenance, how that would work and how it's structured? And
Basically, you'd have to have a second question on the ballot, because it's a different type of referendum question, is I guess the best way I can explain it. An operations referendum question is just, I'm going to exceed the revenue limit by X number of dollars for X number of years. Generally, districts will go 3 years, 5 years, or forever. The other type of question, the one that we didn't go to before that we're talking about now that you're saying kind of explain it. It's like when we built this building. So when you built this building, I'll equate it to a house. You take out a mortgage and you pay that mortgage over whatever your time period is. And we can run different scenarios. A common time frame for schools is 20 years. So we would add up a lot of different maintenance costs and spread the cost over 20 years. And you would take out a loan to do so, and it's a bond, and the loan would have interest costs then associated with it. So what we went to the first time around, we did a $1.6 million referendum each of 5 years. In year 1, 1.2 million was maintenance. In year 2, 1 million was maintenance. In year 3, 8 million. And we said, here were the projects we were gonna knock off. You know, now you would take that 1.2, 1 million, 800,000, 600,000, 400,000, add it all up and go for a referendum. So the question would read something like, do the voters approve $5 million for these maintenance projects? Roof, parking lots, a new entrance at the middle school, science labs. So it would be everything capital related, add it all together, and then we get the money as soon as the voters say yes, because we get the proceeds from the loan, but then we pay it back over 20 years. That's how that's structured, rather than just being like 1 year in and out. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. I guess the difference is, in a building project, you borrow it, you spend it to build it.
Yes.
Here, we can't do the maintenance all in 1 year, so we're basically sitting on that money for a period of time. and
Yep,
just
when
spend it
you issue a debt question, a capital debt question, you have 3 years to spend it. So much like we even had to get this building built in 3 years.
Is it even possible to do all that maintenance in 3 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that means in 3 years, we would want to do all the roofing that we are looking at for 0 to 5 years. So you can't do those roofing projects that are looking at 6 to 10 years either. You know, nor do you want to do that, because you don't want to stick the next building your house for 30 years from now with all the roofing sections to be done up front. But yeah, you couldn't do it all, but we could take the high priority stuff. You know, there's a lot of mechanicals, a secure entrance, throw in the LED project, you know, you can get some really good quality work done, but then you're still left with this equipment or these roads, you know, 6 to 10 years or 5 to 10 years.
Kathy, you had mentioned during the tax levy portion of the discussion that in the years that we're spending more now, it has a negative impact on our state aid. If we were to go in a situation like that where we have 36 months to catch up on all of that maintenance, are you at all worried about that negatively impacting our state aid to a degree that maybe we're not anticipating?
Yes, so it does, but when Baird does our costing, they take that into account. They will take that loss of aid into account for that tax levy increase. So, like the last referendum when it was $98, that already calculated in the loss of the state aid because we were spending more, and then that's attributed to part of the taxpayer cost.
Another question. Obviously, there's a price tag. If we were financially able to do all of the projects we need to do, and it was appropriate and prudent to do them in a 36-month window, there's a dollar value that's workable. And maybe this is a question for the next board meeting, but I guess the question is, do we have a sense at this point in time what that number would look like? And do we even look at getting a bit creative? The two things I'm thinking about, normally you're talking about a 20-year window on a debt offering. if we have a shorter time period, and again, I think the comment about staggering some of those repairs makes sense, because you don't want to replace a roof that has 5 years left on it just to replace it. That's foolish. At the same point in time, we also know that there's going to be some cost involved with a debt offering. So is there a number that we need to be at before it becomes cost effective to do a debt offering? Does it have any negative implication on our credit rating if we miss certain numbers? I guess I'm just thinking about some of the logistical things. If we could go to something like, let's say, a 7-year or a 10-year or a 15-year to make that debt go away sooner, does that make it more palatable for potential bondholders, you know, people like Putnam or Oppenheimer who want to come in and work with Baird to take, if they can ship all those bonds out to one buyer and get a fair market price, are there some ways we can be creative in order to make this fit our terms better than somebody else's terms?
Mm-hmm. You know, and another piece is, if you want to go back in 10 years and do another section of roof, again, you want that first one dropping off, ideally, to be able to layer the next 10 years of maintenance in. But to answer your first question, yes, that's why we work with Baird again, because often they will say, this isn't practical. You want to go this many years. You know, even the debt defeasance that we do, we don't do the formal process to apply it each and every year, because there'd be fees on that, like you say. So we let it build up until there's a point in time that it's cost effective and worth it to actually proceed with the process that applies it to escrow. So yeah, that I was already thinking at some point in time, we probably need to have Baird here at a board meeting, because that's getting into, again, lots of different scenarios that they can run and help analyze which ones are best for the district.
I kind of think we're at that point, if we are discussing a referendum next year, to try to get those numbers laid out and what that looks like, if that's possible over the next, I know we have a short time frame here if we want April, but I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but I think it's something we need to start looking at fairly quickly here.
Is anybody leaning one way or the other so we can help Kathy, like, pin down those numbers, like, as far as what she's presented?
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, Jessica, because we had this conversation today too, and I forgot, like, if there's ideas on here you don't like, you know, so we went through 3 main ideas, and then there's sub-points to like 1A, 1B, 1C. If there's ones you can cross off so that we're not spinning our wheels trying to calculate those and work on those, and like, so far, some of the discussion has been, oh, maybe we do want to, this is what I'm hearing anyway, maybe we do want to look at that second question idea and the capital debt. And again, I wasn't thinking along those lines. So if there are some of these that you want me to pursue or some of these that you want off, yes, that would be very helpful to know for the next board meetings.
You can take number 2 off.
Take number 2 off?
Yeah, what he said.
Okay. Take number 2 off, got it.
And I guess I'm kind of reluctant to go back to the taxpayers, or the city residents, with the exact same question again. I think we need to do our homework and look at options to what's feasible and say, okay, we looked at it, here's what we're thinking.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know, I may be looking at it kind of more opposite of that. I'm thinking about it, all the work we put into coming up with that question last time, and we all agreed it was a good question. I try to think of what changed since then, and obviously COVID, but COVID had started at the vote already. All the maintenance, all the reasons we were doing that question are still there, plus another year later, another cut, bunch of cuts later.
But that's also true on the taxpayers' end. They're looking at COVID and
I get it.
this isn't good.
Right, and that's the main challenge, that also changed. I was gonna list that too. But COVID also is costing the school more.
Yeah.
Some people won't understand how it's costing more, especially having all that time off and stuff, but, you know, everybody's strapping themselves more and more. I feel like it was a good question and a lot of work was put into it, and I don't know why the vote went the way it did. I mean, we educated people the best we could. We put a lot of time in. I don't think a lot of people really cared to learn about school financing, which I can't blame them. But school, you know, districts around us passed their referendum, and that was, COVID was going on then too. And I think it was even more scary at that time. There was a lot more questions about it then. I mean, we don't know where it's gonna go now. And I understand there's a lot of people in the population who have less money right now. And there is a lot of districts that are going for one this vote on November 3rd, which to me is way scarier than going for one in April. I mean, granted, we don't know what's going to be going on then, but I wouldn't argue against going for almost the same thing.
I'm gonna basically come in and reiterate what you're saying, Tony, because number one, of all the districts that went to referendum when we did, we were one of the few that didn't get through. And so, you know, the economic conditions that,
We were the only one.
okay, sorry, we were the only one that didn't get through.
21 of 22 back.
Okay,
For
so.
the operational.
So the issue comes back to, of 22 districts that had the question put before them, 21 found a way to do it. Be that as it may, whatever reason people voted for or against, we're now a little further along. I think what it comes back to, and again, we heard a little bit of this at the last meeting in the participation section. We need to provide a product to people that makes it worthwhile for them to invest.
Our students are worth it.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with you. In fact, I think if we go back to that participation section, just about everything that was mentioned during that section, and those were good ideas. I'm not meaning to discount what was said. Those are good ideas, and we were doing all of them. We haven't always talked about that, and I think we need to put that on our shoulders again, and we need to do a better job. I think the other issue is, and I said this the last time around too, if we go out and let's just say we pursue the same referendum, same dollar amount, same 5-year time period, if we go out and the town of East Troy, the village of East Troy, the town of Troy, the municipalities within our school district don't do something to help us with growth, we're gonna be right back where we are again in 5 years. That's the cold, hard reality. Look at Mugwanago. The growth in Mugwanago is staggering. Now, I'm not saying I want East Troy to become Mugwanago, and that's a common theme I've heard from people in the community. Well, if you want to go to Mugwanago. It's not what we're looking for. But we need to have residential development. We need to know that our real estate agents can go out and find quality single-family housing for people that want to move into the district. We need to know that businesses that are in the district now can go out and get engineers and bring them into the community and make them a part of the community. We need to have businesses coming in. We have a business park, and I know that there are things going on, but we've got to stop talking about, well, this is what we're going to do. Municipality officials, we need their help. Flat and simple. I mean, if people want to know how we fix this, every student we bring in is worth $10,000 to us. You want to fix a $500,000 deficit? It's real easy. You bring in families that add 50 students to your school district. Our needs haven't changed. And I mean, none of us want to pay more property tax time. I get that completely. But the fact of the matter is, there is a growing group of people in this community that are talking open enrollment out because they see us take a French teacher out of the lineup. And the next question is, what's next? What's the next thing? And we've talked about fighting open enrollment, since I've been on the board, and I'm sure it goes back well before that. We've got to not only keep the quality of the product where it is, we have to enhance it and continue to find new ways to enhance it. And cutting programs is not the way to do it. Cutting activities, cutting sports, and none of these things have been specifically discussed, so I don't want to send the wrong message. But everything's going to be on the table if we don't find a way to close this operational deficit. There are no sacred cows anymore, and if we can't continue to maintain the product, then that 4 years until we're dissolving it's not a fallacy, it's a reality. So
I don't think there's any one of us that doesn't want to pursue it. I think the question getting there is it going to be the same as we did last year, or are we going to look into this long-term bond or find another way? We're always looking at making reductions to operations because unfortunately we haven't had any success with the referendum, and our students are worth it. Our staff is worth it. This community is worth an investment, and it would be really nice if our community felt that way also.
Well, that's just it. I think at some point here, our community has to realize the level of support that the school deserves. Like I said at the last, or I don't know if it was the last meeting, but I said before, we have superstar people working in these buildings right now, and we may not always have them. I think a lot of them we're lucky to still have, and we have people we can trust right now in positions that we need people we can trust. There's a lot of distrust out there in the world right now, and it's like when you find a doctor you trust or a mechanic you trust, you stick with them. And I can tell you right now, we have people to trust an investment in right now, and we may not always have that. And if the community could just, obviously you can't make people trust people, but I'm telling you right now, we have them here now. These are the people we want to go through this with and work out and find these solutions with. So I think we just got to do it. When we were in school, someone paid for us to have the education we got, and it's our turn. It's the taxpayers' turn, and I get saying that right now is harder than ever before, at least in my lifetime, because of the pandemic going on. But like I said, someone paid for me.
Oh, that's literally everybody's fallback. Oh, because of COVID, I can't do X, Y, or Z, whether it's on a personal level or a corporate level. That it's unfortunately a blanket that applies to the planet right now. So hanging our, excuses up on COVID really isn't, the best thing. It happened to everybody. Nobody's been an exception for it. So, we definitely need to get this through.
And like we said, how many of them, we're the only one who didn't pass, and so we can't blame COVID on that vote. And there's actually 47 school referendums on the November 3rd ballot in Wisconsin. And they're not afraid to go for it.
Totally agree with all of that. I think we just need to look at all the options available and make the right decision on the question that we present to them. So I think looking at the bonding, something we need to do just to make sure.
Well, and here's the other question. Obviously, if you put two questions on the ballot, you run the risk that there's going to be more confusion. But knowing that things like the maintenance could be handled under a bond, last time we essentially went out looking for at most $9 million, 1.6 million, 5 years, non-recurring after the 5th year. If it was cost effective to structure it, let's just say that the maintenance number was $6 million. If we could structure that even over a period like 10 years or 12 years, the voters had an assurance, because one of the things we heard last time was trust. Well, you know, it's gonna happen, and then you're gonna wanna do it again, and nope, the maintenance is out there, this is all we're gonna do, you know, that's a fairly ironclad thing. It's not like you can come back and change that after the fact. I guess the question is, do we look at using a combination? We have to address the operational deficit. I mean, there's just no way we can't. But again, now if we come back and say, okay, we're gonna take that $6 million of maintenance, spread it over a 12-year period, maybe we come back even then and shorten the operational referendum to a 3-year period, or maybe we stay with a 5-year, for an amount that then falls in line with what the need would be specifically for the operational side of it. So the immediate impact, again, using or knowing that COVID is still a fact of life for a lot of families' economies, maybe it gives us a little bit more breathing room than we would have if we just went out and asked for another 5-year referendum. But it also then, from a democracy standpoint, if somebody feels very strongly that we need to address the maintenance, they can vote yes on the bond question. If they don't think we're doing a good job on the operations, they can say no on the operations. Obviously, we're looking for a yes vote on both of those things. My concern is that the way we addressed it last time, and it made sense, but the way we addressed it last time, it was all or nothing. We were putting operational and maintenance into the same question. We didn't give them a chance to split it out. I'm concerned about having 2 questions, and we're gonna have to do that much more education to make sure people are aware. But if we can bring down the bill, get the maintenance taken care of, and find a way to minimize, I mean, we're still gonna end up making cuts, we know that. If we get this through, even at the last level, it's not going to eliminate the need for additional cuts going forward. But again, even if it's a 3-year period on the operational, my hope would be that gives us some time to work with the municipalities to try and give them a chance to demonstrate what they can do in the way of growth, in the hope that, you know, if we had to come back in 3 years and we're seeing positive movement in the community, if we have reason to believe as taxpayers that the tax base is growing and the mill rate's gonna continue to fall, we're all in a better position. If we get out 3 years and the municipalities haven't been able to build new growth within the communities, then taxpayers have another opportunity to come back and make the decision whether or not they want to continue to support the school district to keep those deficits out of the budget. So.
All right, lots of things to look at. Does that give you enough information, Kathy, on what to for us to discuss at the next meeting and try to, what is our drop dead date to do the April referendum?
It's in January.
January.
The last time we went for in April, I didn't look up this exact date of how the dates are going to fall now, but I think our drop dead date, the last time we went in April was about January 20th. I would say if we can get it even again sooner, early January, because the county needs to put the question on the ballots, and they like to do that process a little bit earlier than when they're up against a deadline. Their back's up against a deadline. So if we could get it settled, if we have an early January board meeting at the latest. If you recall, the last time we went to referendum, we approved it in December.
Mm-hmm.
That would still be great, just for timing and, you know, getting everything ready. But the reason we did that was so it was in the previous calendar year, so that if it failed in April, we could go back at what would have been this coming election, November 2020. But next year, there's no November election, so it's less important to have it in December than it would be, if that makes any sense. There was something I was going to mention on.
There's an April election the following, right? So
Good point. Good point. So you would, because if we did it in yeah. Because of that following time, you'd want to be December, yes, and you can only have one per calendar year. Okay, good point. Good point. So yeah, so I guess it is December that we want to have this nailed down and be approving in the December board meeting.
Do we
Just the
think
other
we can
thing
get
that
Baird
might-
to the next meeting?
What's that?
Do we think we can get Baird with some preliminary feedback to the next meeting to figure?
I
because
will try. It's a little early because again, we have to do all this push forward process, and I think that would have been November 19th is the date that I had, and our next board meeting's prior to that. I'll try. Here's the other part though. We don't know the next biennial budget. We don't know anything on it. We don't know even if this year's budget is going to be reduced, what I was mentioning yet. So I know that in previous years we tried to nail down the perfect number that is, this is going to be our deficit, even though that again, there's so many variables, but it's going to be very, very difficult to project with any kind of certainty what the deficit is going to be in 21, 22. I said to somebody flippantly today, I'll tell you next October what 21, 22 is going to look like. So I said I'd like to get you guys thinking about philosophy, more again, core values, I guess, rather than trying to target a number. You know, will we target a number? Yes, absolutely, but there's so much that could make it not be the number, frankly.
Yeah, best guess at this point, that's all we can hope for.
Try to put numbers in a hat and draw them out. It's just a joke. It's fine.
Example, again, I was going to save this for communications, but so after we got done setting the levy, do you remember I mentioned the 30% special ed aid? I just opened up an email from DPI, and they're going to be reimbursing at 28.21%, not 30% already. And then they say, but this is a low estimate because we don't want to overpay because the payments are spread out during the year. So in June, they make the final adjustment. And could it be 28.5 then? Sure. But 28.21 instead of 30% is 43,205 of loss. So I'm going to be adding that to the positive negative sheet that I keep going all the time.
Guess news like that, and we're going to lose 43,000 from the start to the finish of a meeting. I'd like to motion to adjourn. Withdrawn.
All right, anything else on the referendum at this point? Okay. Move on to the next agenda item, process for curriculum review and plan for PD as it relates to equity.
Yep, so we've been talking about curriculum review, and as we're having that discussion, it's really important to start with what's already in place, because there's a lot in the district that's already in place related to policies and procedures and the processes for curriculum review. So in your packet, starting on page 88, I have included the district policies that already exist. There are 7 of them right now in totality that address, first of all, what learning looks like in our district, because we have created policy around what our classroom environments and our learning environments and our learning strategies should look like. Much of that is described in the personalized learning environment, but it's also indicated in Policy 111 with our school district goals. We've also established a process for adoption and revision of curriculum. That exists. It's a detailed process that has dates and procedures for reviewing and adopting curriculum. And then we have policies that address the selection of materials. So every time we review curriculum, we need to ensure that our instructional materials align with the standards and the curriculum that we've adopted. We have policies in place that already address that. So we have a very strong system that has been built around this particular topic. Also in place is we follow the rollout of the Wisconsin academic standards. So essentially, there are 3 phases. So when the state rolls out standards, they do it in a 3-step phase, so 3 years essentially. The first phase that we use is understanding the new standards. So essentially, our educators are studying those standards. They're comparing them to the existing standards. They're identifying gaps. They're recognizing areas that have to be revised. In phase 2, once there's that solid understanding, right, then they're revising their course overviews and we're starting to look at materials. What materials are they currently using? Does that support the new standards and the revisions that exist? Do we have to go through the adoption of new materials? And then lastly, once those materials are implemented, then we have to look at assessment and instruction. So then we are actually instructing students using those new standards and we're assessing their understanding of those particular. So it happens in a 3-year phase. It is a definite system that doesn't just happen overnight. Part of that is a curriculum review cycle. So that is also included in your packets. It is, let's see, page 107. So Kate, if you could click that magnifying glass for me, that would be great. Is it not working? Hang on. Okay. Okay, so the state essentially, oh great, Justin. So I will talk about it. It's in your packet. Yes, that's it, Steve. So the state essentially has identified the years in which certain curriculum is going to be reviewed. And so we have done this back to 2017-18. So you'll see it starts with an intent to review. So what happens during the intent to review is the state assembles a committee. And it consists of school leaders, educators, and consultants from DPI for that particular content area. And they spend typically 1 year reviewing and revising the existing standards. That year includes a public participation component. So when they have pretty much what they feel the standards should be, they roll them out for public participation. You'll see that some of those standards start their review in January and others do it in July. So it's on a cycle because we know that every school district cannot review every set of standards each year. It just does not make sense. So there's a year of that, and then we have the final standards. And those are rolled out to the districts, and then we begin this 3-phase process. Are there any questions on that right now? Okay, so the standards for the state. So the state standards, if you remember, every year before the school year starts, the board adopts our state standards as the district standards. So we are operating off our state standards. They drive our curriculum and what students should know and be able to do. So that serves as the foundation, which is great. The question is, are there possible additions in this process that we need to add? And there are some things to consider. So, if you can go back to the presentation, Kate, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. The first is a definition of equity. Now, this definition is actually used, I'm sorry, I got it. is actually used by the state in all of their standards adoptions that have happened. So starting this year and moving forward, the state is using this definition of equity, and it's actually created by the Council of Chief State School Officers, which is really a group of elementary and secondary educators that have come together and kind of drive this. And so the definition is that equity is that every student has access to educational resources and rigor that they need at the right moment in their education across race, gender, ethnicity, language, disability, sexual orientation, family background, and or family income. So that lives in all of DPI standards right now. It is something that we have talked to our staff about already this year because we are doing some standards review, and it is part of the EMLSS, which I will get into in a bit, so we'll talk about that in a bit. So we have that definition to go on, but then some other things to consider is our district really focuses on the 6 C's, okay? We talk about content, certainly is the foundation, but we believe there are many skills that cannot be measured by a standardized test, but are super important. Those being collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity, and curiosity. So the idea is we have to ensure, once our standards, which is driven by the state, are laid out and our staff are well aware of them, we have to look at our instructional materials. Instructional materials are designed around the standards, but we believe that they should also meet the needs of what we value in the district. And so an idea is to come up for look-fors when you're reviewing instructional materials relating to the 6 C's initially. So, for example, do the materials that we adopt allow us to address the 6 C's? That could be something as simple as thinking about collaboration. Are there discussion components? Are there materials that provide multiple perspectives? That's where that collaboration comes in. Partnership opportunities. We talk in our district a lot about partnerships. Communication. Are we providing opportunities for spoken, written, nonverbal, and visual modes? Critical thinking. Utilizing varied levels of questioning, which we're talking about all the time right now. Opportunities for higher order thinking. Open-ended questions, explaining, defending, creating, and applying. Opportunities for reflection. That directly relates to our assessment continuum. Creativity, ideas and opportunities for exploration. Synthesizing solutions, projects, other components, and inquiry-based opportunities. So as we go through materials, we would assess them to determine if they meet those needs, because if they do, they would be addressing the needs of the 6 C's. Additionally, there is a movement for culturally responsive materials. So as we're looking at our materials, in addition to meeting the needs of the 6 C's, would our materials be identified as culturally responsive? Now, if you do the research on this, there are a number of scorecards that have been developed specifically for this reason. Those scorecards typically address 3 areas. Representation being the diversity of characters, that typically relates to the characters that we're seeing in storybooks and what students are interacting with. Different cultures, skin tones, abilities, socioeconomic status. And then accurate portrayals. So are the stories that they're reading or the books that they're looking at, are they multi-dimensional characters? Are they portrayed in stereotypical or non-stereotypical ways? Things to consider for that. Social justice orientation is another component of the culturally responsive materials. And so that's decolonization, power, and privilege. So it's really essentially understanding the relationships between people. Centering multiple perspectives, so affirming, valuing, and sustaining worldviews. And then connecting to real life, which is something we talk about in our district all the time. We are trying to get kids to see the connection for what they're doing in the classroom to the real world, which is where our community partnerships come in. And so we want to relate that learning as much as we can to the students' real life, their experiences, their communities, and the cultures that live within our own community. And then lastly, we would look at teachers' materials. So do the materials provide strategies and curricula with guidance on how to approach, enhance, and customize lessons for their student populations? This speaks to personalized learning. If we're meeting the needs of the students that are in front of us through the materials that we are presenting them with. Any questions on that? I feel like I'm talking a lot at you. Okay, so when we think about that, we have to also think about professional development. And so I kind of want to just go over what we're already doing for professional development in the district thus far that relates to what I've already talked about standards and that equity definition. These are things that occur during our in-service time, and it's important to note that our in-service time is so very valuable this year. It's valuable every year, but this year we took 2 of those in-service days, if you remember, and we moved them to the front of the school year so we could do the Ready, Set, Go conferences. So we're really trying to pack in information in 2 less days, essentially, and so we've really kind of planned out what would that look like. So our first in-service day that was in September, we started by reviewing the framework for equitable multi-level systems of support, EMLSS, which you have often heard of as RTI, our response to intervention when students are not responding to instruction. That's the academic side. And then you hear about PBIS, which is the behavioral side. Both of them live together in the equitable multi-level systems of support. And the idea of that is using data to drive instruction. So we worked with our staff to consider what their data is telling them. And in EMLSS system says that on your universal, that's the instruction that all kids get, right? Your universal instruction should meet the needs of 80 to 90% of your students. So if you're looking at your data and your data says, for example, let's say I'm teaching a unit and my data tells me that only 60% of the kids mastered the targets for the unit, that signals I have a universal instruction problem because I did not meet the needs of 80 to 90%, so I have to consider that. When it is above 80 to 90%, then what we're able to do is target students who may need additional assistance in developing an understanding around those standards and skills. So we worked on using data to inform instruction. We're going to be working on bias and collective efficacy. So an example of this, collective efficacy is the belief that as a staff, you can meet the needs of students so that they will find success. So sometimes you might hear people say off the cuff, oh, that he can't do that, she can't do that. That's based on a belief somewhere. And it impacts the student, right? Because if we're coming to it with the idea you are not able to do this or accomplish it, clearly our behavior is impacting that. And so we're going to be exploring bias and how that impacts the efficacy of a building, what our beliefs truly are in the building and how that impacts students. That relates to culturally responsive education as well. And it relates to equity in all of the categories that were addressed. So gender, race, socioeconomic status, identifying students with disabilities. We all have beliefs around all of those groups that we really have to hone in on. And then we're focusing on the assessment continuum. So how are we measuring what students know and are able to do? And that's a focus on formative and summative assessments as well as goal setting and feedback. So how are we meeting those students' needs? So taking all of that information, what are our next steps in this process? We have a student learning committee that 2 of you are on. And so in my mind, the next steps is for that committee to come together, right? We need to look at the policies that exist, and many of them are very strong. You will notice on some of those policies there are things highlighted. That was me looking through. There's just been changes in titles of jobs. For example, Director of Curriculum Instruction is no more. It's now the Director of Teaching and Learning. So even things like that, but this would be our opportunity to kind of look at those policies and determine, hey, do we want to put something in there for selecting instructional materials? And that also includes the instructional materials that are available in the library. So do we want to create a scorecard for the 6 C's to support what our district believes that our kids need to develop? Do we want to integrate a scorecard for culturally responsive materials so that we're ensuring that we are picking materials that present the standards, because that's what we've adopted, right? But in a manner that addresses those 3 categories that we talked about. And then come forward with any suggested policy revisions. So that essentially is the process. So if you dig into those policies that already exist, you'll really see the process, especially for curriculum adoption and revision, really laid out. So essentially next month, for example, new course proposals will be coming forward to you because they were supposed to be in October. They come to you to be approved so that they can go into planning guides, and then the scheduling can start for students picking their classes. Questions, discussion? What do you think about the plan moving forward?
Plan moving forward sounds good. You do have what seems to be an unfinished sentence, though, in there?
Yes, that's why it's highlighted.
Okay, I was like, what?
So there's
What
a
does
word,
that
yes,
mean?
we were like, what do you think this word is? Yes.
Okay.
That's why I highlighted it, so I would come back to that.
Okay.
We were exploring that in district office. I'm like, what do you think this means? I wasn't here when this policy was created, but neither was Chris, so we didn't know. Okay, so then Sarah Eckert, who serves as the coordinator of teaching and learning, her and I will reach out. I believe, Ted, it's you and Tony that are on the student learning committee, from what I looked up. We'll reach out with, hey, what are some, chances for us to get together and kind of dig into this a little bit more, and then bring it back to the board as a whole.
And just so everyone's aware, obviously, as you figured out, we want to not just do random actions. It's about the process being done and what's guiding the process, which Amy laid out very well tonight, about what will guide it and how policies relate back to it strongly, right, to determine whether or not are we following policy or revising a policy. And then with that, as Amy mentioned, this work of the Student Learning Committee and then always bringing it back to the full board will always be done. The agenda for whatever is done at the Student Learning Committee will always be posted. So that'll also be, just because there's only 2 board members, still needs to be a posted agenda item. So we'll always post when they're meeting, where they're meeting, and what will be discussed. So just like we would do for the operational subcommittees or the negotiation subcommittees.
All right, we'll move on to reports. Dr. Ebner.
A couple of you had already referenced it, obviously. I wanted to go over a few accomplishments due to the fact at one of our more recent board meetings, it sounded like, and I can appreciate feedback, but it sounded like, there was a question about with where the current school district was at and the challenges we're facing financially and other things that it was somewhat maybe implied that the school district needs to continue, and I appreciate feedback, needs to continue to try to find something that is very attractable for others that makes us unique, or to reach out to other districts possibly to find out what they're doing that's so unique, that's making them, I don't know, I mean, in the eyes of maybe some people, more welcoming, I guess, if you want to say, from a standpoint of larger enrollment. I don't know how to say it. So I wanted to go over a few things, and I appreciate that feedback, I really do. What I wanted to go over was just randomly a few accomplishments. If you want to call it bragging, okay, I'll call it bragging. I would like to say it's proclaiming. proclaiming the positive things of what East Troy has done, and providing clarity, because I think sometimes people aren't necessarily aware of all the good things that are going on. And I could go on, right? Hopefully, anybody who feels that way, hopefully some of that is being accomplished through our district newsletters now that are being done and put forth in regards to it. But we've had so many accomplishments since March in regards to our response to COVID itself and assisting student learning and assisting families. But I think there's other things besides our response to the COVID current situation that goes well beyond that. So a couple of things I just wanted to point out was, and some people have mentioned it tonight in regards to mentorships and dual credit programs and everything else, but we just received from Gateway Technical College an update in regards to our transcripted credit program. And that was brought to, I think it was brought up by somebody in regards to, continue as a district. Maybe you guys should reach out and try to have more opportunities for skilled programs and partnerships. And I appreciate that feedback. I really do. I will say, I think we skyrocket that one. I think we take that one far away from many other districts. And this is just an example. So, I mean, anybody can make that type of statement. I agree. Like, I can say, I think we do an outstanding job in that. But here's why I think we do an outstanding job. Besides what we did earlier in the night of approving the Start College Now, and obviously we offer early college credit now. So we have the early college credit, which is the 4-year institutes, which are offered for when we're not offering a program for kids here at East Troy. And then we have the Start College Now, which is more on the technical side, where kids can go to a 2-year institute and obviously take courses again for courses that are beyond what maybe the East Troy School District is offering, for probably more in their area of interest beyond 12th grade, right, and going on to their career. We also, through the transcripted credit program, so transcripted credit allows our high school students to earn both high school and Gateway credit at the same time. Now, Gateway's courses, though, are taught by our high school faculty. So our high school faculty teaches these courses and the learning targets and the necessary curriculum of Gateway that you would find on the Gateway campus. It's being done right here in the East Troy School District. And it's being done because our teachers were trained and are willing to teach those courses via their training. And we do that so our students can have the opportunity of taking them here, because we know it's not always capable for them to go to Gateway and receive that opportunity. So our teachers have been trained and spent numerous times, and we've restructured so much of our high school programming to allow these opportunities. And a special credit to the current teachers that are teaching some transcripted credits, from either Amy Beaver, Deb Lysing, Ryan Holly, Janessa Palouas, Michael Moss, Lori Crandall did last year, Nolan Polowinski, and Ryan Viles. They all were teaching one or more transcripted credits. And where I go with that is this year alone, this past year in 2019, 2020, so how many kids really got an opportunity to take advantage of that? East Troy High School had 352 student enrollments in transcripted credit courses, right? So in transcripted credit courses, 352 students enrollment in transcripted credit courses, earning a Gateway credit, earning an East Troy credit, right, or more, and each student, the full savings for all the students was a total of $118,434.82 because of what we offer, and because of those teachers willing to have had the training and providing it and aligning the necessary curriculum to Gateways. And those kids don't have to leave East Troy. They have that opportunity right here, but yet they're getting Gateway credit, they're getting a high school credit, or credits. So I find that just astonishing. I find that great. And I just want people to make sure they understand that. I mean, little reference, back in 2016, 2017, we had 212 for $76,159.42. So it shows the progression. And that goes to credit to Ms. Keene and Mr. Kleinowski and other people who have been in leadership positions prior, and to all the staff, because that's been something that we absolutely agreed with for the individuals that have brought that up in the past, and that is we need to expand those opportunities, and we have. Where I go with that is, I will once again say, I'm unbelievably impressed with East Troy, how we have expanded programming opportunities under the current situations that we have from a financial budgetary standpoint. Because we understand, and maybe people will disagree with me, that's fine. I think we do that to meet one of our major district goals, which is to recognizing the talents of each and every child in an era of globalization. And to recognize the talents of each and every child, you can't have one traditional pathway. It's no longer existent, and it shouldn't be in any school district. There are too many kids with varying interests and passions and skill levels, and that we have to meet that gamut. We have to meet it. It's no longer just a basic pre-K-12 is a basic relevancy of foundational, just foundations that everybody gets. That is not in existence any longer in a pre-K-12. There is not just, foundational skills are important, don't get me wrong. Foundational components and concepts are very important, don't get me wrong. I don't overlook those at each and every single discipline and grade level. But there is not any specific track where everybody just goes down the same track any longer. You have to offer a variety. And to be honest, people used to think of tracks in high school. Tracks begin long before that. And I'm not saying tracking. I'm not a proponent of tracking. I don't like tracking. I don't like ability grouping. But what I am saying is meeting kids' interests and passions and helping them find it earlier in their age development is clearly better. So the earlier we can help an adolescent understand maybe what their career opportunities are, not forcing them into it, finding out what there are for career opportunities is all the better for that child to start all of a sudden exploring it early on. There's a reason why middle school years are called exploratory years, and it's for that purpose. So I think those are really important. A few other things, if I can actually read it, because it's very small print, so I apologize. Thinking I'm needing stronger reading glasses today, I've noticed, so that's not good. East Troy High School, my gosh, I can't read anything anymore, is one of 14 schools that have a certified MIT Fab Lab. We've said that before, but I think the opportunities that provides is incredible. Class of 2020, this past year's class, right, was one of the very first classes to have an opportunity to have 7 years of robotics if they wanted it. 7 years of robotics. I know the middle school was one of the very first schools in the nation to have offered robotics within the curriculum. So it wasn't just an extra, add-on. During the 1920 school year, obviously we were able to purchase all new Chromebooks. I think that's really important. Why do I bring that up? Well, I'll tell you what. Thank goodness we had the new Chromebooks purchased before what occurred. And I will tell you, there are districts who have Chromebooks for all of their students too, but they didn't have updated Chromebooks. And they're running into huge technical issues in regards to the capacity. So because of all the necessary recordings and videos that are being done, we were fortunate enough. Luck? Yeah, maybe. But you know what? That was planning too. That was planning. In 2019, East Troy became a 2-time recipient of the Fish Tour Grant for music education. East Troy High School transitioned to a trimester schedule in 1920 school year. Relevant? I think very relevant. It gave kids additional opportunities to take another elective class, which I think, again, goes towards the interests and passions. East Troy Middle School Band, East Troy High School Jazz, constantly getting recognized for awards and recipients. The East Troy 1819 High School Yearbook was inducted into the Gallery of Excellence by Walworth County Yearbook. East Troy Community School District is one of the first to officially be recognized in the districts in the county as a Google for Education reference district. Little Prairie Primary, obviously, as we know, was the very first to offer a smart lab, literally the first. 102 students in 2020 took 169 AP exams. 76% of these students were earning a 3 or higher. The NASA Hunch program that goes down to the Johnson Space Center each and every year We are recognized, Easter High School has earned a Global Education Achievement Certificate. We have a free stay and play weekly program for families with children from infant to the age 4 that we always provide feedback to. Countless programs and advanced placement programs and online courses. I won't go over all that. Over 15 transcripted courses from Gateway, and I know that's going up. Obviously, we have certified smart labs throughout our entire district. 1 in 59 schools to be approved by the Department of Instruction to implement the Global Education Achievement Program. Continued success of our pupil service team, where they have bi-monthly parent meetings and community education nights. We continue to meet or exceed our individual growth targets for each of our students, which is essential to me because it's all about learning. We continue to increase our authentic applications of learning with different programming and different practices. So I can go on, and I won't go on anymore, and I skipped a lot, which is in our annual booklet. But where I'm going with it is, and it isn't to brag, but it is to proclaim, and that is there's just, I want people to understand, I appreciate when people say, you know, do more for the trades or do more for the skills or you need to offer more other programming. I appreciate that because what it tells me right away is we need to continue to make sure we're proclaiming the stuff we're doing. And it doesn't mean that that we're not going to continue to improve, but I think there is a lot that is being done. We are trying to proclaim it. I mean, we have it on all of our web pages, we're posting so much on social media, but please just, I mean, it's an important factor. The other thing is, I will just state it, I mean, I'm not going to get into the operational. As you notice, I actually stayed quiet tonight while you guys were talking about where should we go with the operational, and I think there's a lot of work to be done in the next weeks to come, hence why I remained very quiet. But I do think, as nobody here will dispute, and I know that, but the disparity, and we shared that the last time we went to the operational referendum question, the disparity between those that are passing referendums and those that are not, and then the monies associated, is only becoming larger, and the gap is only ever growing. And so when some people do mention, hey, look at another district, what are they doing? I don't mean to sound cynical. I oftentimes will say, they passed an operational referendum. They've passed our operational referendum numerous times. And that's not me being cynical, that's me saying that's the challenge for us. So as we're doing these things and another district is passing, you can throw out any number you want, but if they might be on their second operational referendum in the last 10 years or more. And that's besides maybe what they've done on the capital side, right? So those things become a challenge. So I just bring that up because sometimes people will say, look at the other district. I do. I look at other districts a lot. I'm very proud of what we have done in our district. I will say it becomes more difficult as that gap continues to grow of those that are passing referendums and those that are not. I'm also very proud, and I'll leave it at this. I do believe, and I will be happy to continue to stress it and go over it, I think our district has demonstrated strong fiscal responsibility. That does not mean that everybody would have made the same decisions. And that does not mean that everybody would have chosen the same programming to invest in or what to reduce each and every year we have to deal with the budget. I get that. I don't sit up here trying to convince people that every one is perfectly the right decision. But what I am saying is I think we can represent how we've been fiscally responsible and that we aren't turning quickly to the stakeholders or taxpayers for every time there's needed assistance. We have waited quite often and tried to do due diligence by looking at our budget internally. Matter of fact, as we've told people many times, right, $7.8 million of budget balancing efforts in the last 13 years to try and not have people within our community have to support that on top of their already tax roll. I get that. So I just think those are some of the things. We can become, and I will state this, we can become whatever anybody wants us to become. I mean, but that's all about a decision of what is that? What is that? Because we can become it. I mean, I went to the Palmyra Eagle stuff, and I don't throw that out to put Palmyra Eagle, but I remember sitting there in the bleachers last year at many meetings for the dissolutions process. And I remember Kathy and I were sitting one night in the bleachers, and we both turned to each other, and it was like something just hit us in the face, and we're like, you know, you can really operate a school for a very long time. The question is, what do you want the school to be? You can operate a school a long time. I mean, you can go down to a building, to one classroom, to classrooms of 50 people. You can operate a school district and a school building for a very, very long time. It's just a matter of what do you want the quality to be. And I think that's the key question that we always need to be asking as we approach it. And there's no doubt, I respectfully say, and it has to be with a balance of what can people not only support from a standpoint of what you're asking them to utilize the monies for, but what also can they afford at this point in time. I understand that completely. I totally get it. And that's what we got to figure out and navigate a little bit, but we also can't forget, what do we want as a quality product as a district? Let's see, is there anything else? Sorry. I think that's it.
Chris, I think proclaiming is something that we should be it's not bragging. We're proud of it because it's the only way people are ever going to hear. In our financial situation right now, I think most districts and people, when they're budgeting and stuff, that's a reactive environment. And all the things you talked about, somehow we've been able to stay proactive and do all those amazing things despite being in a reactive environment. And it's a testament to what we can do, and imagine what could be done if our environment turned proactive. And as long as we're talking about celebrations, Reed, do we have any sports celebrations?
Tomorrow, we're hosting subsectional for cross-country. Thursday, we're hosting regional for volleyball. Tomorrow, our boys soccer team is competing in the regional tournament against Catholic Memorial at Waukesha South. So a lot to celebrate. The fact that we're participating in those, I think, is a huge celebration. So.
Awesome.
I want to reiterate that, what Reed just said. I mean, I know that was a lot of dialogue. I know it's constantly ongoing. I want to compliment you that you show the trust in us to say, look, you know, we shared it with you. You guys said we want to stay committed to the overall objective of what we said in the reentry plan, and that was the physiological and psychological health of our kids. And you recognize the importance of not only athletics, but activities in general to try to make that occur. And I know that's not an easy statement to just follow under the current conditions because you don't know where that could land. But where I'm going with it is thank you for showing the trust in us to saying we trust your judgment that when you're navigating this world and you'll use all the information. I can just state this. I mean, think about if those opportunities, and not just about the individuals that have been recognized there on those accomplishments, but all the kids who have been able to participate, whether it be just through practices, to be quite frank, up to this point in time, all those individuals, and not just in the sporting world, that in the clubs and everything else, that they've had opportunities now of interacting and staying on course with something of their interests and passions. I do know of other districts that are unable to provide for various reasons. Maybe their district's not comfortable. Maybe the county's not comfortable. I know it's a lot of reasons. I will tell you flat out, I am really thankful that this county and this district see it differently and are able to do something differently because of it, because those kids need that so very much. And I hope we can continue to provide it. And Reed and the coaches and the players and all the club advisors deserve so much credit, because I will tell you there's not one thing that's being done the exact same way as that you would have seen prior to March 13th. It's not. I mean, everything has a little twist on how it's being done, and some much greater than others. And I will say this for the record, we're going to be dealing with winter sports coming up. And it's a heavy topic in the RVC and the Rock Valley. And we're all in different counties. That creates an issue, just like it did for the fall sports. And not everybody's seeing eye to eye. I mean, let's be honest. And that's okay. But we're just having to decide whether or not can we do things as a conference, or do we have to do things not as a conference for a while. And what does that mean? And some of it's county related. I get it. But things will have to maybe be different in the winter if we're able to continue to pursue and we're navigating that world. We're going in the winter months, that's going to be more moderate to higher risk level sports, to be quite honest. So that will require more mitigation measures for us to have. And you might say, so what are you considering on that, Chris? I'm going to say it flat out. I mean, we're having discussions right now. I don't know if we'll go there, but for a higher risk sport, we have to think about how can we maybe, if we are able to provide the sport, how can we still protect the rest of the populace? And some of that might be, it might have to go through our virtual learning. It might have to go through that. Like we're trying to recognize and provide you an opportunity, but you might have to choose a different path of learning while you're in that high risk sport. I'm not saying guaranteed, we're just saying, right? There's also some thoughts being thrown out there, and Reed and I are working through all that. Do you try to provide cohorts for those athletes or different activities? So they're in cohorts. So they're together, they're kind of bubbled, and they can still get in person maybe, but they're bubbled together. I don't know how you navigate that whole world at a high school level when they're in different disciplines so much. It'd be a lot easier at elementary, right? But those are things that are being discussed. And I just want you to know that. I mean, that's how we're making this work. Bob, I'm sorry, you had something I think you're going to say.
It's a lot easier to have trust to make those kinds of decisions when you can trust your coaches and your advisors and fundamentally your kids. I mean, at the end of the day, all of the work that you put in means nothing if the teams and the coaches don't follow through. So, I mean, at the end of the day, credit goes to them.
All right, thanks, Chris. Kathy?
I turned my mic on because I knew I was speaking next, and then look, my guffaw goes into the mic. Membership count, I'll be very quick. You've heard it before, but this is the official results on page 109 in your packets. So we are down 84 in head count over last year's head count. We had projected some of that decline already, so we're really down 66 over what was the projection. So again, we had projected already to be down 18 with the normal just overall declining enrollment that the whole state, except for a few pockets, is pretty much in due to birth rates. Open enrollment in, we grew by, I believe it is 16 this year. I think we were 103 last year, we're now 119. Open enrollment out is flat. We were 274 this year. Last year, we're 275 this year. The hard part comes in when you go over to the left and you look at the blue. My mind starts going, okay, where are we going to reduce next year? And if you look, just theoretically, if you pick something like Prairie View grades, down 3, so -3, -3, -3 in 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So that's -9. Eventually that will be times your $10,000, 90,000. That should be a position and a half. Well, how do you make a position and a half when you've lost 3 kids per grade in 3 grades? And, okay, so then you go, well, the bigger losses were in 4K, kindergarten, 1st grade. I'll take 1st grade. 1st grade, we lost 15 over the head count. We still have 90 students. So, and we have 4 sections. So do we go to 3 sections? That's 30 in a classroom. That's, again, the process here that makes all of this so darn difficult, especially when you start getting into smaller and smaller numbers. On the back, page 110 is some detailed information about open enrollment that you can look at as you choose. That's all the crunching of the numbers and the budget changes. And then on page 111, we did a survey of local school districts around us. So I don't know how many are on that list, but about 20. And how did they fare in their enrollments? Some are worse, some are better. The DPI released several spreadsheets statewide, and I believe it was a 3% decrease statewide. So if you have any questions, let me know. Page 112 is not supposed to be in your packets. That is something was on the copier that got on there. So that is not part of the report.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Amy, you have anything else tonight? Kate, anything to add? Okay. I have nothing, so we'll move on to policy review and development. We have second readings of a few different policies.
You have a few different policies there. The first one is 411, the equal educational opportunities. So between the first and second read, we got some feedback from legal counsel, so you'll see that in red. So I'm just going to point out some things. The highlighted parts are things that were new to the policy from what was existing in the previous policy to what we're suggesting. So some of the things that you'll see, the policy would now encompass gender identity, genetic information being protected. Also references the new policy that we would have as part of Title IX, that all complaints for sexual discrimination or sexual harassment would be handled according to that policy, so it wouldn't fall under this one. Let's see, so definitions are updated. And the suggestion, so 411 kind of feeds right into 411.1. So they're listed on the agenda as two separate policies, but if we can maybe just kind of go into the next one then too. The suggestion from legal counsel was to remove the board from the process of investigation and really make the investigation process more specific. That was the intent of some of the changes to the policy. And you might recall from the first read, really defining as part of the definitions, looking at the different areas that harassment can have and more specific behaviors, because prior to this, the policy really focused on kind of certain types of behaviors without it having the broad. It looked a little more like sexual harassment was the focus of the policy in the past. So looking at different ways that harassment can happen. So that's kind of the things that I would highlight from the 411, the rule for educational opportunities, and then that goes right into the 411.1. Any questions or things you want me to look at for that? So then I think the next one on the agenda is the 411 point, well, it doesn't have a number, the sexual harassment and sexual violence towards students. Is that right?
51211.
512, you want to go to 512?
Ours says 411.11.
411.11. Okay, yes, the sexual harassment and sexual violence towards students, yeah. So this one's a new policy. This is the one because of the title changes to Title IX regulations that we needed a separate policy for Title IX. So you'll see there's a lot of our legal counsel's recommendations from there, and some of it was kind of moving things that might have been in one area, and some of it is language being used, but adding in some definitions for what specifics are within Title IX, so actual knowledge, who is a complainant, who is a respondent, what is considered supportive measures. And some of that was later in the policy originally in the first draft, and so moving that up further. Another thing to note that wasn't in the first draft is that we have to specifically name who the Title IX coordinator is in the district, so that needs to be part of the policy. So right now, that's me. If that ever changes or anything, then we have to make sure that that policy gets updated. It's already on our website as being that I am the contact person for all Title IX complaints for that. And then it kind of goes through Title IX with the changes that they've made, really outlines a very specific grievance process and everything that has to be followed. So this policy really follows what the legislators have put into place for Title IX in terms of investigation and grievances and what can be supportive measures and that sort of thing.
And the big difference on that policy, Kate, is the part of, obviously, sexual component, sexual harassment, sexual violence.
Yes, sexual harassment, sexual violence, so it includes things like, it gets very specific into different behaviors that you might see. Rape, fondling, lots of specifics. Anything on that one right now? Okay. And then the last one on the agenda, I believe, is the 512, the bullying, harassment, hazing involving employees. So prior to this point, the policy was really just about harassment, the employee policy, and trying to have more of a match between what we have on the student side and on the employee side. So the definitions you'll see are largely the same in terms of the behaviors that you might see for bullying, harassment, and hazing. And then those same kinds of definitions for the different types of harassment. Again, sexual harassment would follow the other policy under Title IX, but religious harassment, national origin harassment, age harassment, race, color. Also, we did not previously have conflict as part of the policy. We've talked about that a lot, just as it relates to, we have an employee conflict amongst employees policy already, but it is referred to in here because that's a normal part of life, but sometimes gets kind of misinterpreted. So, and so the reporting procedures and then the complaint procedures are outlined within this, which prior to this, the complaint procedures and everything were not as detailed about that. So one of the feedback pieces from the legal counsel was really about making sure that the days match so that we use either calendar days or business days. And there were some discrepancies in a couple places, so probably put that into business days because the calendar days doesn't always make sense for the timelines that are set forth right now in this. And I believe you have another one in your stack that wasn't actually on the agenda to be looked at tonight. So you can disregard that. It'll come in the future.
All right. So this will be on the agenda next month then for final approval. All right, thanks, Kate. Communications announcements. Anything else? Okay. Future items for the board. Anybody have anything?
One thing that I guess I'd like to see us come back and have a discussion about again is we're talking about going back to referendum and use of resources. We've had the Burns property on the market now for a while, and to the best of my knowledge, we haven't heard anything. There hasn't been any new interest in it since February, March. I think it might be wise to have a conversation with the people representing us in selling the property and seeing if there are comps out there. As we start talking about wanting to ask favors of the municipalities in terms of helping with growth, I look at that property and obviously we need to maximize what we get out of that for the benefit of the taxpayer. That's our duty. But that can take on several different courses. And even if we had to look at dropping the price on that, if push came to shove, if we had the right development, the right growth there, it may mean additions to the tax base in a fairly short time period to reduce the burden to others living within the village. It might mean more kids for the district. And again, if that property turned into something that created 10 or 12 or 15 new students, we're talking about $100,000 to $150,000. So I think it's worth coming back, and we all know the economy has changed significantly in the last 12 months. And I guess the question is, how can we best use those resources, and is it time for a review?
Okay. Yeah, that would be good. Is it worth having the realtor come in?
Ask, do you want to, on the next agenda, just have a discussion first amongst yourselves, or have the realtors here, or that was going to be my question.
I would think in a closed session and talk with them about strategies for the property, if that's doable.
Yeah, mainly, I want to hear what the experts think makes sense at this point in time, and if we disagree, we disagree. If we need to make some actions, we can move accordingly.
Sure. Okay.
That can be in a closed session, and we can do it at the next board meeting, and we can discuss, would you like to have that closed session actually prior to the regular board meeting starting? So they're not, we're not doing it at the end of the regular board meeting, which can get fairly late. So maybe do 5:30 for 30 minutes. Would that be enough?
You're suggesting that maybe they don't want to show up at 10:30 to go into closed session with us?
Yeah, I'm suggesting.
I think that's probably not a
10:30
good
might be a
idea.
nice night, Bob.
No, that makes sense.
Okay, we'll post it as a negotiations of a sale of property.
All right, and that's all we have tonight. I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.